The sound of the world's return is sharp, an alarm slicing through the quiet dark. Before the eyes have fully opened, the mind is already racing, chasing a day that has not yet begun. The first light is not from the sun, but from a screen, a glowing rectangle filled with demands, notifications, and the curated happiness of others. There is an immediate sense of being behind, a debt of attention owed before your feet have even touched the floor. In the kitchen, the coffee spills, a dark stain spreading across the counter, and a wave of heat flashes through the chest. A sharp word is exchanged over a forgotten task, leaving a small, bitter residue in the air. Then the phone rings, a call from work, a problem that needed solving yesterday, and the pressure mounts. The jaw tightens, the shoulders creep towards the ears. These are the small sparks, the tiny embers of frustration that land on the dry tinder of a tired mind. By themselves, they are nothing, but together, they begin to smolder, threatening to build into a flame. This experience, in its countless variations, is the quiet hum of the modern world. We live in a subtle, pervasive age of irritation, a time of inner fire. It is a heat that lives within the chest, that fuels our sharp replies, that powers the endless, silent arguments we have in our own minds. It is the anger that flashes in traffic, the resentment that simmers over an email, the judgment that rises when we scroll through our feeds. This fire, left untended, consumes our peace. It burns our energy, it damages our health, and it casts a shadow over our most precious relationships, leaving us feeling isolated and exhausted. We often believe this anger is a personal failing, a flaw in our character, a weakness to be hidden or suppressed. We fight it, we wrestle with it, we deny it, but all this struggle only seems to fan the flames higher. But what if there was another way? Imagine, for a moment, a different image. Not a fire, but a river. A wide, calm, and clear river, flowing silently under an open sky. What if the goal was not to extinguish the fire, but to learn how to cool its heat in these clear waters? What if the fierce energy of anger could be understood, transformed, and guided toward a different purpose? This is the invitation of the ancient wisdom found within Buddhism. It is not a call to a distant, esoteric faith, but a practical, psychological guide to understanding the workings of our own minds. It offers us the tools to create our own inner river, a current of compassion and clarity, with the power to soothe the burns of our daily lives, and to carry us gently toward a state of profound and lasting peace. It is a path that begins not by looking outward for a savior, but by turning inward with courage and with kindness to face the fire within. To begin our journey into the heart of anger, we must first meet it without prejudice. As if for the first time, in our world, anger has a terrible reputation. It is seen as a destructive force, a sign of weakness, a loss of control. From our childhood, we are told to manage it, to suppress it, to count to 10, to bite our tongue. We are taught that civilized, spiritual, or successful people are those who do not get angry. And so, when the familiar heat rises in our own chest, when the sharp words form on our lips, we often feel a secondary wave of shame and failure. We have lost the battle. We have let ourselves down. This initial view, this judgment that anger is simply bad, is the first wall that prevents us from truly understanding it. The Buddhist approach asks us to gently set aside this judgment and to look with a clear and curious mind. It invites us to ask a radical question. Is this powerful energy truly just a poison, meant only to be discarded? Or could it also be a messenger, carrying a vital piece of information for our well-being and our growth? Let us first be honest and acknowledge its poisonous qualities, for they are undeniable. When we are in the grip of anger, it feels like a venom spreading through our veins. There is a physical contraction, a tightening in the jaw, a clenching in the fists, a fire in the belly. Our heart beats faster, our breath becomes shallow, our body prepares for conflict. The world narrows, our focus shrinks to the source of our irritation, and all other perspectives are blotted out. Our mind becomes a frantic and hostile place, replaying the perceived offense over and over, building a case, rehearsing arguments, fantasizing about retaliation. In this state, we cannot think clearly. We are incapable of empathy, and we lose our connection to our own deeper wisdom. This is why, in Buddhist psychology, anger, or more accurately aversion and ill will, is considered one of the three fundamental poisons of the mind, alongside greed and ignorance. These three are the roots of all our suffering. Greed, or craving, is the act of pulling things toward us, of wanting more, of clinging. Aversion, or anger, is the act of pushing things away, of rejecting reality, of wanting things to be different than they are. And ignorance is the fundamental confusion that fuels these two. The mistaken belief that satisfying our cravings and destroying what we dislike will lead to lasting happiness. So, when we see anger in this light, as a force that pushes away the world and poisons our own mind, its destructive nature is clear. It is the energy that fuels violence, that destroys relationships, and that corrodes our own spirit with the acid of resentment. Yet, this is only half of the story. If we only see the poison, our only strategy will be suppression, a constant and exhausting battle against a fundamental part of our own nature. The deeper wisdom lies in looking past the heat and the noise and asking what message the anger is trying to deliver. Every strong emotion arises for a reason. It is a signal from our organism. Hunger tells us we need to eat. Tiredness tells us we need to rest. And anger, in its purest form, is a powerful signal that something is wrong. It can be a messenger telling us that a boundary has been violated. It is the energy that rises in a parent who sees their child in danger, the force that says, "Stop. This is not acceptable." It can be a messenger telling us that a core value is being trampled. The indignation we feel in the face of injustice, cruelty, or deceit is a form of anger, an energy that, when harnessed wisely, can fuel profound social change and acts of courage. It is the fire that has motivated countless movements for human rights and dignity. On a more personal level, anger is very often a messenger from a deeper, more vulnerable part of ourselves. It arrives when we feel hurt, unheard, disrespected, or unseen. It is a loud, protective guard, standing in front of a softer, more wounded feeling. To truly understand this dual nature, we can look to a very famous Buddhist teaching, the story of the second arrow. Imagine you are walking peacefully through a forest. Suddenly, and without warning, you are struck in the arm by an arrow. The pain is sharp, immediate, and real. This is the first arrow. In life, there are many first arrows. There is sickness, the loss of a loved one, the unkind word of a colleague, the betrayal of a friend, an unexpected financial problem. These things are, to a large extent, outside of our control. They are the inherent, unavoidable pains of human existence. Now, as you stand there, reeling from the pain of the first arrow, you have a choice. You can tend to the wound. You can acknowledge the pain and begin the process of healing. Or You can react with rage and despair. You can shout, "Why me? This is terrible. Who did this? I can't believe this happened." In your fury and anguish, you pick up another arrow from the ground, and you stab yourself in the exact same spot. This is the second arrow. The second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the anger, the resentment, the self-pity, the fear, the endless stories we tell ourselves about the injustice of the first arrow. The Buddha's teaching is simple, yet profound. Experiencing the first arrow is inevitable, but shooting the second arrow into ourselves is optional. The poison of anger is the second arrow. It is the suffering we add on top of our pain. The messenger of anger is the signal from the first arrow, the raw data that says, "There is a wound here. Attention is needed." Our practice, then, is not to pretend the first arrow doesn't hurt. It is to learn to feel its sting without immediately reaching for the second arrow of our own reactivity. This understanding leads us to one of the most important psychological insights of this path. Anger is very often a secondary emotion. It is like the visible tip of an iceberg. It is loud, hot, and impossible to ignore. But the vast, unseen mass that gives it its power lies hidden beneath the surface of our awareness. More often than not, the true root of our anger is fear. The driver who yells at another car that cut them off is reacting to the flash of fear, the thought of an accident, the sense of their mortality. The manager who berates an employee for a mistake might be masking a deep fear of failure or of looking incompetent to their own superiors. Anger also serves as a loyal bodyguard for hurt. When our feelings are hurt, when our heart is wounded by criticism or rejection, it feels incredibly vulnerable. It is often easier and feels safer to put on the armor of anger, to lash out and attack, than it is to expose the tender wound of our own pain. We prefer the heat of battle to the chilling vulnerability of being hurt. And perhaps most commonly in our modern lives, anger is a mask for helplessness. When we feel trapped in a situation we cannot change, when we feel that our voice doesn't matter, when we feel powerless against large, impersonal systems, that profound frustration can curdle into a chronic, low-grade anger. It becomes a free-floating resentment that can latch onto any small trigger, a misplaced set of keys, a slow internet connection, because it is too painful to face the larger feeling of powerlessness. So, when anger arises, the messenger is inviting us to ask, what lies beneath this? What is this fire truly protecting? Is it fear? Is it hurt? Is it a feeling of utter helplessness? This gentle inquiry is not an intellectual exercise. It is a compassionate turning inward, an act of courage to meet the softer, more vulnerable feelings that our anger is trying so hard to shield from view. When we can name the true source of the pain, the anger often loses its fuel. We have received the message, and the messenger's shouting is no longer needed. We can begin to tend to the actual wound, the first arrow, instead of continuing to stab ourselves with the second. Having seen that anger can be both a poison and a messenger, we now turn our gaze to the process itself. How does a moment of peace transform, in a flash, into a raging inferno? An outburst of anger can feel like a sudden hijacking. One moment, we are calm, and the next, we are possessed by a force that feels alien to our true selves. Watching as our own voice says things we don't mean, and our body acts with a tension that is not our own. To understand this, we must become like a patient anatomist, slowing down the entire event to dissect its components. We must trace the path of anger from a single, tiny spark to a consuming, emotional wildfire by seeing the anatomy of our own outbursts, not with judgment, but with gentle curiosity. we can begin to find the spaces where we can intervene, where we can bring a drop of cooling water before the fire grows beyond our control. Let us begin with a common scene. You have had a long, tiring day. You are finally home, seeking a moment of respite. A loved one, perhaps your child or your partner, accidentally spills a glass of water on the floor. In an instant, a wave of intense irritation, far greater than the small accident warrants, surges through you. A sharp, cutting remark leaps from your mouth. The atmosphere in the room turns cold and heavy. The wildfire has arrived. Now, let us rewind this scene in slow motion. The first element in this chain reaction is the spark, the trigger itself. In this case, it is the sight and sound of a glass tipping over, of water splashing onto the floor. It is crucial to see this trigger for what it is: a neutral, sensory event. It is physics. An object, due to gravity and an external force, lost its stability and its contents were displaced. There is no inherent meaning, no malice, no personal attack in this event. It is simply an event in the world, like a leaf falling from a tree or a bird singing outside a window. The first step in our practice is to recognize the raw, untarnished neutrality of the trigger itself. But the human mind is not a simple camera that merely records neutral events. It is a meaning-making machine. And this is the second and most crucial stage in our anatomy, the application of fuel, which takes the form of a story. Instantly, faster than conscious thought, the mind takes the neutral sensory data of the spilled water and wraps it in a narrative. The story is not, water has been spilled. The story is, you are so careless, you never pay attention. Or perhaps, now I have to clean this up, on top of everything else I have to do. Nobody appreciates how tired I am. Or even, you are doing this just to annoy me. Notice how these stories are filled with judgments, assumptions of intent, and generalizations like always and never. We project a history of past grievances and a future of anticipated burdens onto a simple, present moment event. This is the fundamental difference between sensation and perception. The sensation is the raw data, the sight, the sound. The perception is the story we tell ourselves about the data, and it is the story, not the event, that is the true fuel for the fire. This brings us to the third stage, combustion. The moment the mind creates its story of being wronged, disrespected, or burdened, the body believes it completely. The body does not know the difference between a physical threat, like a tiger in the jungle, and a perceived psychological threat, like the story of being unappreciated. It responds in the only way it knows how, by activating its ancient, hardwired survival system. The story of nobody appreciates me triggers the same alarm bells as I am under attack. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system. The heart begins to pound, pumping blood to the limbs in preparation for a fight. The muscles tense, the shoulders rise, the jaw clenches. A wave of heat flashes through the torso. The breath becomes short and shallow. This entire suite of physiological responses is the feeling of anger. It is the story made manifest in our flesh and blood. The body is now a coiled spring, a loaded weapon, humming with the raw, combustible energy of a perceived threat. We are no longer dealing with a simple, spilled glass of water. We are now physically and mentally preparing to go to war against an enemy our mind has just created. The fourth and final stage is the wildfire itself, the outburst. With the mind telling a hostile story and the body primed for battle, the resulting action is almost inevitable. It is the path of least resistance. The energy has to go somewhere. So, the sharp words fly out. The door is slammed. An object might be thrown. A scathing look is given. This external expression is simply the logical endpoint of the preceding internal stages. By the time the outburst occurs, we are often no longer in control. We are simply riding the wave of a powerful chemical and emotional reaction that was set in motion the moment we believed our own unexamined story. The feeling of regret that often follows comes when the hormonal storm begins to subside and the logical mind comes back online, looking at the wreckage and wondering how such a small spark could have caused such a great blaze. The ancient Buddhist teachers understood this process perfectly. They illustrated it with a simple, powerful parable. A man walks into his house at dusk. The room is dark and shadowy. As his eyes adjust, he sees, coiled in the corner, a snake. His heart freezes. His mind screams, "Danger!" The story is immediate. There is a deadly creature in my home. I must kill it, or I will be killed. His body responds instantly. His heart pounds. Adrenaline courses through him, and his hands search for a heavy stick to strike the snake. He is filled with a mixture of terror and aggressive rage. He is ready to act. Just as he raises the stick to strike, his wife walks into the room and, seeing him frozen in a strange posture, calmly flips on the light switch. In the sudden brightness, the man sees the truth. It was never a snake. It was simply a coil of rope left in the corner. In that instant of seeing clearly, everything changes. The fear vanishes. The anger dissolves. The tension drains from his body. The violent impulse disappears. Nothing had to be fought or suppressed. The light of clear seeing was all that was needed. The snake was the perception, the story. The rope was the sensation, the reality. Our practice then is to learn how to find the light switch inside our own minds, to learn to question the snake stories that our minds so readily create, especially when we are tired, stressed, or feeling vulnerable. This leads to a final, crucial piece of this anatomy. Why do we sometimes react with the fury of a wildfire to a spark as small as a spilled glass of water? The reaction seems utterly disproportionate to the trigger. This is often because we are carrying an enormous emotional debt. Imagine that every time you experience a small frustration or irritation during your dire traffic jam, a rude email, a plan that falls through, and you don't allow yourself to fully process it. You stuff it down. Each time you do this, it is like making a small purchase on a high-interest emotional credit card. You avoid the immediate discomfort, but the debt accumulates. The frustration from the morning commute, the annoyance from the midday meeting, the worry from a phone call, they all add up, unseen. By the end of the day, your emotional credit is maxed out. Then, the spilled glass of water happens. It is the final, tiny charge that pushes you over your limit. The resulting explosion of anger is not really about the water. It is the entire days, or even the entire weeks, worth of unprocessed emotional debt coming due in one painful, overwhelming payment. The person in front of you is simply the unlucky banker present when the account defaults. Understanding this can bring great compassion for ourselves. We are not crazy for having a big reaction to a small thing. We are simply human beings whose capacity to hold unprocessed pain has been exceeded. Now that we have dissected how a single outburst occurs, we must ask a deeper question. Where do these stories and this emotional debt come from in the first place? Why is our mind so predisposed to seeing snakes in the dark and accumulating debt? To answer this, we must look deeper into the very soil of our mind, to examine the seeds of anger that lie waiting there. We have now dissected the anatomy of an angry outburst, watching in slow motion as a neutral spark is drenched in the fuel of our own stories, leading to a consuming wildfire. This naturally leads us to a deeper, more fundamental question. Why is the forest floor of our mind so often covered in dry tinder? Why are we so quick to create stories of being wronged, so ready to see snakes where there are only ropes? To answer this, we must go beneath the surface of a single event and explore the very soil of our consciousness. We must become gardeners of the mind, learning about the seeds that lie dormant within us, the conditions that cause them to sprout, and the power we have to cultivate a landscape of peace instead of one of perpetual fire. Imagine your mind is a vast, deep, and fertile garden. Every single experience you have ever had, every thought you have ever thought, every word you have ever spoken, and every action you have ever taken has planted a seed in this garden. A moment of shared laughter with a friend plants a seed of joy. An act of generosity plants a seed of compassion. A harsh criticism received in childhood plants a seed of insecurity. A time you were deeply wronged plants a seed of anger. In the Buddhist tradition, this deep, foundational layer of the mind is sometimes called the storehouse consciousness. It is like the deep, dark, nutrient-rich soil that holds every potential within it. It forgets nothing. Every seed, positive and negative, lies there, waiting. There are seeds of forgiveness and seeds of revenge, seeds of understanding and seeds of jealousy, seeds of love and seeds of hate. They all coexist within us as latent possibilities. This is not a good or a bad thing. It is simply the nature of our mind. The crucial thing to understand is that a seed is only a potential. It has no power on its own. It cannot grow unless it is watered. This brings us to the most active and important part of our gardening, the practice of watering. What is the water that causes these seeds to grow? It is our own attention and consumption. Every day, we are making choices about which seeds in our garden we will nurture. When an old memory of a painful argument surfaces, and we choose to dwell on it, to replay the conversation in our head, to feel the old sting of the injustice, we are consciously pouring water on the seed of anger. We are rehearsing our resentment. Each time we do this, the root system of that anger seed grows a little deeper, its stem grows a little stronger, and it becomes more likely to sprout quickly and vigorously the next time a similar situation occurs. The same is true of our words. When we engage in gossip, complaining, or cynical conversations, we are collectively watering the seeds of negativity in ourselves and in others. We are creating a microclimate where only the weeds of discord can thrive. Perhaps the most overlooked form of watering is what we choose to consume with our senses. The mind does not only consume food, it consumes sights, sounds, and ideas. When we spend our time scrolling through social media feeds filled with outrage, comparison, and conflict, we are bathing our garden in a steady rain of agitation. When we exclusively watch news programs that emphasize fear, division, and catastrophe, we are methodically nourishing the seeds of anxiety and anger. The conversations we listen to, the music we hear, the books and articles we read, all of it is a form of water. Without this understanding, we can feel baffled by our own irritability, wondering why we feel so on edge. Yet, a quick inventory of our daily consumption often reveals that we have been unconsciously watering the seeds of anger for hours every day. The practice of becoming a conscious gardener, therefore, begins with a mindful audit of what we are allowing into the sacred space of our mind. Furthermore, just as in any physical garden, some conditions make the soil more fertile for certain types of growth. There are times when our inner ground is particularly receptive to the seeds of anger. Recognizing these states is an act of great wisdom and self-compassion. One such condition is fatigue. When we are physically or mentally exhausted, our resources are depleted. We have less patience, less resilience, and our ability to see things clearly is impaired. In this state, the soil of our mind is weakened, and the weeds of irritation and frustration can easily take root. Another condition is hunger. The link between low blood sugar and irritability is a simple biological fact. When our body is in a state of need, our mind is more likely to perceive the world as hostile and frustrating. Chronic stress is another potent fertilizer for anger. A mind that is constantly flooded with the stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, is like a greenhouse kept at the perfect temperature for cultivating rage. Every small annoyance grows much faster in this supercharged environment. Finally, a sense of loneliness or disconnection can make the ground fertile for anger. When we feel isolated, our primal defense mechanisms are heightened. We are more likely to perceive slights where none are intended and to react defensively, as our system feels it is navigating a threatening world alone. Knowing this, we can see that caring for our anger is not just a mental exercise. It is also the very practical and compassionate work of ensuring we get enough rest, eating nourishing food, managing our stress, and cultivating meaningful connections. Tending to the basic needs of our body and heart is the essential act of preparing the soil of our garden. Now, this may seem discouraging. If our mind is filled with these negative seeds from a lifetime of experiences, are we doomed to a life of weeding? This is where the profound beauty and hope of the practice lie. For every seed of anger, there is also a seed of compassion. For every seed of jealousy, there is one of sympathetic joy. For every seed of despair, there is a seed of hope. The garden contains all possibilities. We are not tasked with the impossible and violent work of uprooting all the weeds. Such a struggle would only create more conflict. Instead, our task is one of selective cultivation. We have the power to choose which seeds we water. When you deliberately bring to mind a person you are grateful for, you are watering the seed of joy. When you read an inspiring story or listen to uplifting music, you are nourishing the seeds of hope and love. When you perform a small, anonymous act of kindness, you are strengthening the root of compassion. When you sit in silence and simply enjoy your breath, you are watering the seed of peace. The practice is a conscious shift in our internal agriculture. It is noticing our tendency to obsess over the one weed in the corner of the garden and choosing instead to turn our attention to the beautiful, fragrant flower blooming in the center. The law of the garden is simple. What you water grows. If we consistently and intentionally water the seeds of peace, understanding, and forgiveness, their roots will grow deep, their stems will grow strong, and their blossoms will eventually become so large and vibrant that they overshadow the weeds. The seeds of anger may never completely disappear, but they will be deprived of the light and water they need to dominate the landscape of our mind. They will remain as they are, small, dormant potentials in a garden filled with the magnificent blossoms of our own cultivated goodness. We are not the victims of our mental states. We are the gardeners. The power to transform the entire landscape of our inner world rests in the simple, moment-to-moment choice of where we direct the watering can of our attention. The question now becomes, how do we develop the presence of mind to make that choice, especially when a storm is brewing? This requires a foundational skill, the master tool for any mental gardener, the practice of mindfulness. We have journeyed into the garden of the mind, learning of the seeds of anger that lie dormant within us, and how our own attention waters them into being. Now, we turn to another subtle, yet immensely powerful, mechanism of the mind, one that gives our anger its target and its justification. It is the mechanism of projection. When the fire of anger flares up, our instinct is to locate its source outside of ourselves. We point a finger. We say, "You made me angry. This is your fault. If you hadn't done that, I would be at peace." In that moment of pointing, we create an enemy. The other person becomes the sole cause of our suffering, and we become the innocent victim of their actions. It is a simple, compelling, and deeply satisfying story. It is also, almost always, an illusion. The ancient sages have a saying, "When you point one finger of blame at another, notice that there are 3 of your own fingers pointing back at you." This teaching is an invitation to gently lower the pointing finger and to have the courage to look at what those other 3 fingers are trying to show us. Projection is one of the mind's most clever defense mechanisms. It is the unconscious act of taking qualities, feelings, or thoughts that we find unacceptable in ourselves and attributing them to someone else. It is a way of exporting our own inner turmoil. It feels safer, cleaner, to believe the problem is out there. If the other person is the one who is unreasonable, selfish, or wrong, then we get to remain in the comfortable position of being reasonable, generous, and right. This process provides a temporary sense of relief and moral clarity, but it comes at a tremendous cost. It prevents us from ever understanding the true root of our own reaction, and it systematically dismantles the possibility of genuine connection or resolution. We cannot connect with someone we have turned into a villain. When, in the grip of anger, the mind acts as a masterful, but deeply dishonest, filmmaker. It shoots a documentary about the person we are angry with, but it edits the footage ruthlessly. It selects only the clips that support its narrative of blame. It remembers every past mistake the person has ever made, every flaw, every annoying habit. It conveniently deletes all memories of their kindness, their generosity, their own struggles, and fears. The other person, a complex, multifaceted human being, is flattened into a one-dimensional caricature. They are no longer a person. They are the embodiment of the problem. This act of dehumanization is what gives our anger permission to flourish. It is very difficult to sustain intense anger towards someone you see as a whole person. Someone who, like you, is a mixture of strengths and weaknesses, who is trying their best and often failing. But it is incredibly easy to be angry at a monster, a villain, a caricature drawn by our own projecting mind. We create the enemy we despise, and then we congratulate ourselves for despising them. The process of projection becomes even more profound when we consider the parts of ourselves that we keep hidden, even from our own conscious awareness. In modern psychology, this is known as the shadow, the collection of all the traits we have disowned because they don't fit the image we have of ourselves. It may be our own greed, our own insecurity, our own laziness, our own need for control. We push these qualities down into the basement of our psyche and lock the door, but they do not disappear. And one of the primary ways they make their presence known is by appearing with glaring intensity in the people around us. Often, the things that irritate us most intensely in others are distorted reflections of our own unacknowledged shadow. A person who prides themselves on being highly productive and cannot accept their own need for rest will be driven to distraction by a colleague they perceive as lazy. A person who has repressed their own vulnerability and need for affection may feel an irrational contempt for someone they see as needy or attention-seeking. The other person's behavior acts as a mirror, the intense emotional charge of our reaction, the sheer force of our anger, is a powerful clue. It signals that this is not just about the other person's behavior. It is about something inside of us that has been touched, a locked door that has been rattled. The anger is a spotlight, and instead of shining it only on the other person, we are invited to pivot it gently back toward ourselves and ask, what part of me is being reflected here? Why does this particular behavior have such a powerful hold on me? There is a timeless story that illustrates this process perfectly. It is the story of a man who lost his axe. After searching everywhere, he began to suspect that his neighbor's young son had stolen it. From that moment on, his entire perception of the boy was transformed. He watched the boy walk, and his gait looked exactly like that of a thief. He listened to the boy speak, and his words sounded sly and deceitful, like the words of a thief. Every gesture, every expression, every action the boy took was, to the man, irrefutable proof of his guilt. The man's mind projected the identity of thief onto the boy, and all the evidence was filtered through that lens. Sometime later, while clearing out his woodshed, the man found his axe. It had fallen behind a stack of firewood. He had simply misplaced it. The next day, he saw his neighbor's son again. He watched the boy walk and listened to him speak, and he saw nothing, absolutely nothing, that resembled a thief. The boy's walk was just a boy's walk. His words were just a boy's words. The boy had not changed one bit between the 2 days. The only thing that had changed was the mind of the man who was looking. The projection had been withdrawn, and reality could once again be seen as it was. When we are angry, we are all the man who has lost his axe. We have lost our peace of mind, and we project the identity of thief onto whoever is nearest, convincing ourselves they have stolen it from us. The practice of wisdom is the practice of finding our own axe, of realizing we have simply misplaced our own peace. This involves the courageous act of withdrawing our projections. It is the act of consciously reeling our attention back from the other person and placing it on our own inner experience. When you feel the heat of anger rising towards someone, you can pause, take a breath, and ask yourself a series of transformative questions. First, is my story about this person 100% true? Do I know, for a certainty, what their intentions are? This question pierces the bubble of self-righteousness. Second, what part of this emotional reaction is mine? What state of mind tiredness, stress, hunger did I bring to this interaction? This begins the process of taking responsibility for our own inner climate. And third, the most profound question: what is this person showing me about myself? Is their behavior shining a light on a part of my own shadow that I have refused to look at? This is not a practice of self-blame. It is the ultimate practice of empowerment. As long as we believe that other people are the cause of our anger, we are their emotional puppets. Our inner peace is held hostage, dependent on their behavior, which we can never control. We are perpetual victims. But the moment we withdraw the projection and take ownership of our reaction, we reclaim our power. We move from being a victim of circumstance to being the gardener of our own mind. We may not be able to stop others from acting in ways we find difficult, but we always have the choice of how we respond. We can choose to keep pointing the finger, fueling the fire of blame and separation. Or we can choose to look at where our other 3 fingers are, pointing back to our own stories, our own state of being, our own unexamined shadows. By ceasing to create an enemy out there, we are finally free to deal with the only thing we ever truly have the power to change: ourselves. And this naturally leads us to confront the central character in all of these dramas. The I that feels so threatened, the me that feels so wronged, the very self that we are trying so desperately to defend. We have followed the pointing finger of blame back to ourselves, learning to withdraw the projections we cast upon others. The spotlight, once aimed at an external enemy, now illuminates the very center of the drama. And who do we find there? In every single story of hurt and resentment, we find a small, powerful word: I. You insulted me. You ignored my needs. You threatened my beliefs. You damaged my reputation. This I, this sense of self, is the central character in every conflict. It is the king of the inner kingdom, and anger is the army it dispatches to defend its borders. To truly understand anger, we must have the courage to investigate the nature of this king. We must ask the most fundamental question: who or what is this I that feels so constantly under threat? In our ordinary way of thinking, we experience the self as a solid, continuous, and independent entity. We feel like we are a singular thing, a CEO sitting in the control room of our head, directing our body and thinking our thoughts. This self is the fortress we spend our lives building and defending. The walls are made of our identity. I am a good parent. I am an intelligent professional. I am a kind person. I am a spiritual seeker. The territory of our kingdom includes our possessions, our accomplishments, our relationships, and our deeply held opinions. When someone or something challenges any part of this construction, the alarm bells ring throughout the fortress. When someone questions our intelligence, the wall of our intelligent self is threatened, and we dispatch the soldiers of anger to fight back. When someone cuts us off in traffic, they have violated the territory of my right of way, and we send out the cavalry of the car horn and the angry gesture. The more walls we build, the more territory we claim, the more we have to defend, and the more our lives are consumed by a state of constant, low-grade warfare. The Buddhist teaching at this point offers a revolutionary, and at first, perhaps unsettling, insight. It suggests that if we look for this solid, separate, continuous CEO of a self, we will not be able to find it. This is the teaching of anatta, often translated as no self. This does not mean that you do not exist. It is not a doctrine of annihilation. You are here, breathing, thinking, feeling. Rather, it means that you do not exist as a separate, permanent, unchanging thing. The self is not a noun, it is a verb. It is not a static entity, but a dynamic, ever-changing process. Imagine a river. We give it a name, like the Mississippi River. But what is it, really? Is it the same water today as it was yesterday? Number. Is it the same riverbank? No, it is constantly eroding and changing. The river is a convenient label we give to a continuous process of flowing water. It has no fixed, independent essence. The self is just like this. It is a river of constantly changing experiences. Your body is changing with every breath. Your feelings are arising and passing away, moment by moment. Your perceptions shift depending on your mood. Your thoughts are a ceaseless cascade. Consciousness itself flickers from object to object. We use the word I as a convenient label for this ever-flowing stream of phenomena, but we make the mistake of believing there is a permanent, separate boater in charge of the river. The teaching of no self simply invites us to see that we are not the boater, we are the river itself. When we cling to a fixed, solid idea of who we are, we become incredibly brittle. Any experience that contradicts our self-image feels like a mortal threat. If you believe, I am a calm person, the moment you feel anger, you will become angry at yourself for being angry, adding a second layer of suffering. If you believe, I am a successful person. A professional failure can shatter your entire sense of being. But when we begin to understand ourselves as a flowing process, we become flexible, resilient, and spacious. An insult is no longer an attack on the fortress of me. It is simply an unpleasant sensation flowing down the river for a few moments before continuing on its way. A failure is not a final verdict on our worth. It is simply the river turning a new corner. This insight is the source of profound freedom because it reveals that most of what we are defending so fiercely is an illusion. A beautiful Zen story illustrates this more powerfully than any explanation. A man was in his small boat, meditating with his eyes closed on a misty lake at dawn. He was enjoying the deep silence and stillness. Suddenly, he felt a sharp jolt as another boat bumped into his. His peaceful state was shattered. A wave of anger surged through him. He thought, "Who is this inconsiderate fool, crashing around in the mist and disturbing my meditation?" He kept his eyes closed for a moment, rehearsing the angry words he would use to reprimand the careless person. He felt completely justified in his rage. Finally, he opened his eyes to confront the offender. As the mist swirled, he saw that the boat that had bumped into his was completely empty. It had simply come untied from its mooring and had drifted silently down the lake, carried by the current. In that instant, all of his anger vanished. It disappeared completely, without a trace. Let us look closely at this moment. The event was the same. His boat was bumped. The disturbance to his peace was the same. What changed? The only thing that changed was the disappearance of a target for his anger. The anger needed a someone to be angry at. It needed a self, an ego, an intention in the other boat to direct its energy towards. When he saw the boat was empty, the entire story of being personally wronged collapsed, and the anger, having no ground to stand on, simply dissolved. The deepest teaching of this story is an invitation to look into our own boat and see if we can find a fixed, solid, separate self in charge. If we look deeply, we find only the flowing processes of body, feelings, and thoughts, all being carried along by the currents of cause and effect. In a sense, our own boat is just as empty of a controlling entity as the one that bumped into us. When we truly begin to grasp this, our anger towards others begins to soften dramatically, because we see that they too are empty boats, driven by the unseen currents of their own history, fear, and pain. This understanding is not just an abstract philosophy. It is a practical guide for how to work with anger in the moment it arises. The practice is to shift our identification. When the heat of anger begins to rise, instead of falling into the usual thought pattern of, "I am so angry," we can try to create a little space. We can rephrase it internally. "Ah, I see that the energy of anger is arising in this mind and body." Instead of being the anger, we become the witness of the anger. We can observe it as a phenomenon. Look, there is the feeling of heat in the chest. There is the tightening of the jaw. Now, the mind is starting to tell a story about how unfair this is. How interesting. In this shift from "I am angry" to "anger is present," a revolution occurs. We are no longer identifying with the anger. We are the spacious, calm awareness in which the anger is allowed to arise and pass away, like a dark cloud moving through a vast, open sky. We are the sky, not the cloud. By refusing to fuse our entire sense of self with this temporary emotional state, we rob the anger of its primary fuel, our own identification with it. We have now journeyed to the very core of what fuels our anger, from the external projections we cast on others to the internal fortress of the self that we so fiercely defend. We have seen that this fortress is more like a river than a solid structure, and that our anger often arises from trying to stop this river from flowing. The story of the empty boat has shown us that when we see the lack of a solid other to be angry at, and the lack of a solid I to be the victim, the justification for our anger collapses. This deep understanding marks a crucial turning point. We have thoroughly examined the problem. We have taken the engine of anger apart, piece by piece. Now, with this new clarity, we are ready to move from diagnosis to treatment, from analysis to application. We are ready to learn the practical, moment-to-moment skills that allow us to navigate our lives with greater wisdom and compassion. We begin with the most fundamental, accessible, and powerful tool we possess, a constant companion that anchors us in the present moment, a tool that can cool the fire before it ever begins to rage. Our own breath. We have journeyed deep into the intricate architecture of our own minds, exploring the projections we cast outward and the fragile fortress of the self we defend from within. We have seen how the idea of a solid, separate I is the very bedrock upon which the temple of our anger is built. These are profound and at times complex investigations. It is possible to feel, after such a deep dive, a sense of being lost in a sea of abstract concepts. And so now, we must return to the shore. We must return to the body. We must find a practice that is not complex, but radically simple. We need a tool that requires no intellectual understanding, no philosophical agreement, but is available to us in every moment of our existence, regardless of our state of mind. We need an anchor in the storm of our emotions. That anchor is the breath. It may seem almost insultingly simple. How can the mere act of breathing, something we do unconsciously 20,000 times a day, possibly be the powerful tool for transforming an emotion as fierce and consuming as anger? The simplicity is precisely where its power lies. When we are caught in the grip of anger, a profound split occurs within us. The mind is hijacked by stories, lost in a whirlwind of thoughts about the past, what they did to you, sand, the future, what we are going to do or say about it. The body, meanwhile, is trapped in the present moment, experiencing a cascade of stressful physiological reactions: the clenched jaw, the racing heart, the searing heat in the chest. The mind is in one place, the body in another, and we are torn apart in the middle. The breath is the master key that reunites them. The breath is the one function in our entire being that is happening, without fail, in the present moment. It is the bridge that connects the thinking mind to the feeling body. You cannot breathe in the past. You cannot breathe in the future. You can only breathe right here, right now. Therefore, when we consciously place our attention on the simple, physical sensation of our own breathing, we are, by definition, pulling our scattered mind out of its angry stories and anchoring it back into the reality of the present moment, into the living experience of our own body. It is the first, most essential step in coming home to ourselves. This act of coming home is not just a poetic idea, it is a profound biological intervention. To understand this, let us speak for a moment about the nervous system, the body's intricate command and control center. A part of this is the autonomic nervous system, which operates largely outside our conscious will, managing functions like our heartbeat, digestion, and breathing. This system has two main branches that work in balance, like a gas pedal and a brake pedal in a car. The first branch is the sympathetic nervous system. This is the gas pedal. It is our fight or flight response system. When the mind perceives a threat, whether it's a real tiger or the snake of a perceived insult it stomps on this gas pedal. It floods the body with adrenaline and cortisol, increases the heart rate, tenses the muscles, and makes the breath rapid and shallow. This is the physiological signature of anger and fear. The entire organism is primed for battle. The second branch is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the brake pedal. It is our rest and digest system. It slows the heart rate, relaxes the muscles, and promotes a sense of calm and safety. It tells the body, the threat has passed. You can stand down. You are safe. The problem is, when we are caught in a loop of angry thoughts, our mind keeps telling our body that the threat is still present, and we remain in a state of high alert, with our foot stuck on the gas pedal. This is where the magic of the breath comes in. While most of the autonomic nervous system is unconscious, breathing is unique. We can consciously take control of it, and the way we breathe sends a direct and powerful signal back to the brain. When we consciously and intentionally make our breath slower, deeper, and more rhythmic, especially when we lengthen the exhalation, we are manually activating the parasympathetic nervous system. At the center of this system is a long, wandering nerve called the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the heart, lungs, and abdomen. Deep, diaphragmatic breathing from the belly stimulates this nerve, sending a powerful signal back to the brain that says, everything is okay. It is safe to calm down. It is the equivalent of reaching down with your hand and gently, manually applying the brake pedal. We are using the body to soothe the mind. We are using a conscious, physical act to reverse the unconscious, physiological cascade of anger. This is not about positive thinking. It is about skillful being. It is a practical, biological tool for changing our state from the inside out. Knowing this is one thing, practicing it is another. So let us, right now, explore this practice together. There is no need to achieve anything or to have a special experience. The intention is simply to become familiar with the landscape of our own breath. Begin by finding a comfortable position, either sitting on a chair with your feet flat on the floor or on a cushion on the ground. You can gently close your eyes, or if you prefer, you can leave them slightly open, with a soft, unfocused gaze toward the floor. Give yourself permission, for the next few moments, to let go of all your tasks and responsibilities. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go, and no one you need to be. There is only this moment and this breath. Bring your attention, as gently as you would touch a butterfly's wing, to the sensation of the breath entering and leaving your body. Do not try to change it or control it in any way. Simply observe it as it is. If the breath is shallow, let it be shallow. If it is deep, let it be deep. Your only job is to be the curious, non-judgmental witness of this natural process. Now, you can gently guide your focus to one specific spot. Perhaps you notice the sensation of the air at the very tip of your nostrils. Feel the coolness of the air as it flows in, and the slight warmth of the air as it flows out. Rest your entire attention on this small, subtle sensation. Coolness on the in-breath, warmth on the out-breath. There is nothing else to do. Sooner or later, and probably sooner, you will notice that your mind has wandered. It may have drifted into a memory, a plan, a worry, or an angry thought. This is not a mistake. It is not a failure. It is simply what minds do. The moment you realize your mind has wandered is a moment of victory. It is a moment of mindfulness. When this happens, the instruction is simple. Gently acknowledge where the mind has gone. Thinking. And then, with infinite kindness and patience, as if you were guiding a lost puppy back home, gently escort your attention back to the sensation of the breath at the nostrils. You may have to do this 10 times. You may have to do this 100 times. It does not matter. The practice is not about staying on the breath. The practice is in the gentle, compassionate act of returning, again and again and again. Each return is a strengthening of the muscle of mindfulness. Now, you can allow your awareness to expand, to feel the breath in your whole body. Place a hand gently on your abdomen. As you breathe in, feel the belly expand and rise, like a balloon gently inflating. As you breathe out, feel the belly soften and fall. Breathing in, the abdomen rises. Breathing out, the abdomen falls. This is diaphragmatic breathing, the kind of breathing that most powerfully signals safety to our nervous system. For a few moments, just rest here, feeling this gentle rhythm, this oceanic rise and fall. Each in-breath is a nourishment. Each out-breath is a letting go, a release of tension. If you notice any tension in your body, in your jaw, your shoulders, your hands, you can use the out-breath to consciously soften and release it. Breathing in, I am aware of the tension. Breathing out, I release the tension. This practice, whether done for 30 minutes in formal meditation or for just 3 conscious breaths in the middle of a stressful moment, turns the breath into a sanctuary. It becomes a familiar refuge, a safe island you can swim to in the middle of any emotional storm. No matter how chaotic the external world becomes, no matter how turbulent your inner world feels, the anchor of the breath is always there, waiting for you to return. It is a home that you can never lose, because it is carried within your own body. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh offered a beautiful analogy for how to use this practice when anger arises. He invited us to imagine our anger as a small, crying baby. When a baby cries, it is in distress. It is suffering. A good mother does not get angry at the baby for crying. She does not try to ignore it or push it away. She does not immediately launch into a complicated analysis of why the baby is crying. Her first, most immediate instinct is to simply pick the baby up, to hold it close to her body, and to embrace it with tenderness and warmth. This act of holding, of pure, compassionate presence, is the first step in soothing the baby's suffering. In this analogy, our anger is the crying baby. It is a part of us that is suffering and in distress. Our mindful breathing is the compassionate mother. When the baby of our anger begins to cry, our task is not to suppress it or to act it out or even to analyze it right away. Our first task is simply to pick it up. We do this with our breath. We return to our conscious breathing, and we use that stable awareness to gently hold the physical sensations of the anger in our body. We breathe in, and we become aware of the heat in our chest, holding it with the tenderness of our attention. We breathe out, and we embrace the tightness in our stomach, not to make it go away, but simply to be with it, to let it know it is being seen. This is a profoundly non-violent act. We are not fighting our anger. We are caring for it. We are holding our own suffering with the immense tenderness of our own mindful presence. Just as a mother's embrace soothes a crying child, our mindful embrace of our anger begins to calm its storm, not through force, but through love. This practice of returning to the breath, of holding our anger like a crying child, gives us something incredibly precious. It gives us a moment, a space, a pause between the storm and our reaction to it. And in that sacred pause, a whole new world of freedom becomes possible. We have learned to come home to the breath, to use it as a biological tool to soothe our nervous system, and as a compassionate embrace to hold the crying child of our anger. This practice is the foundation. It does not, by itself, eliminate the challenges of life, but it gives us something immeasurably precious in the face of those challenges. It gives us a moment. It gives us a fraction of a second, a sliver of time that did not exist before. And in that sliver of time, our entire universe can change. This is the discovery of the sacred pause. The great psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, forged one of the most profound insights of human psychology in the crucible of unimaginable suffering. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Let us hold these words as a sacred text for our investigation. The stimulus is the first arrow we discussed earlier, the event that happens to us. It is the critical email, the child's tantrum, the unexpected bill, the harsh word. The response is what we do next. For many of us, for most of our lives, there is no space between these two. The stimulus and the response are fused together. The harsh word comes in, and the angry retort comes out, almost as a single automatic reflex. We are like a machine, programmed by our past conditioning to react in predictable ways. We are not free. We are simply reacting. The entire path of mindfulness and emotional wisdom is dedicated to finding and expanding that tiny space between the stimulus and the response. The breath is the tool we use to wedge open the door, and the pause is the room we enter through that door. We live in a world that conspires against this pause. We live in a culture of immediacy, a tyranny of the instant. We are expected to respond to texts and emails immediately. Breaking news flashes across our screens, demanding our instant attention and reaction. Our lives are a relentless series of stimuli, and the space to simply be, to digest, to reflect, has shrunk to almost nothing. In this context, the act of deliberately pausing becomes a radical act. It is an act of rebellion against the frantic energy of the world. It is a reclaiming of our own sovereignty, a declaration that we will not be puppets of circumstance, but the conscious authors of our own lives. The sacred pause is the reclamation of our human dignity. To make this less of an abstract ideal and more of a practical, in-the-moment skill, we can use a simple and memorable practice, summarized by the acronym STOP. This is an emergency brake for the hijacked mind, a first aid kit for the wounded heart. The first letter is S, for stop. The very moment you feel the first spark of anger, the first wave of heat, the first clenching of the jaw, the instruction is to freeze, just for a second. If you are about to speak, close your mouth. If you are about to type, take your hands off the keyboard. If you are about to stand up, remain seated. You are interrupting the momentum of habit. You are throwing a wrench in the gears of the reactive machine. This initial stop is often the most difficult part, as it goes against the powerful forward momentum of our conditioning, but it is the single most important step. The second letter is T, for take a breath. This is where we deploy the tool we have already cultivated. Having stopped the external action, we now turn inward and consciously take 1, 2, or 3 deep, deliberate breaths. We feel the air enter our body, and we feel it leave. We feel our abdomen rise and fall. As we do this, we are not just waiting. We are actively changing our physiology. We are signaling to our nervous system that we are not, in fact, in a life or death battle. We are applying the biological brakes. This conscious breath creates a circuit break in the escalating cycle of anger, giving our mind and body a moment to reset. The third letter is O, for observe. This is the heart of the pause. In this space that you have created by stopping and breathing, you now turn the light of your awareness inward. What is actually happening here? You can ask, what am I feeling in my body right now? Notice the raw sensations without judging them. There is heat in my chest. There is a tightness in my throat. My shoulders are tense. You are simply gathering data like a neutral scientist. Then you can ask, what story is my mind telling me right now? You might notice the familiar narratives. This is so unfair. He is doing this on purpose to hurt me. I am not being respected. By framing it as a story, you begin to create some distance. You see that these are thoughts arising in the mind, not objective truths about reality. You are observing the storm from a safe vantage point, rather than being tossed about in its center. The final letter is P for proceed. Having stopped, taken a breath, and observed your inner landscape, you are now in a completely different position. You are no longer a hijacked victim of your own reaction. You are a conscious being with a choice. Now, you can proceed, and the way you proceed will be infinitely wiser and more compassionate than your initial, raw impulse. Sometimes, proceeding will mean saying nothing at all, recognizing that silence is the most skillful response. Sometimes, it will mean speaking your truth, but from a place of clarity and calm, rather than from a place of blame and accusation. Sometimes, it will mean walking away from the situation to give yourself more time. The key is that the action you take, whatever it is now a choice, born from a space of awareness, rather than a reaction, born from a place of habit. This is the difference between freedom and bondage. There is a powerful Zen story that perfectly embodies this principle. A revered Zen master was once confronted by a man who was shouting at him, insulting him with a torrent of vicious words. The master's students watched, expecting him to defend himself or to become angry. Instead, the master simply stood there, in complete silence, his presence calm and unwavering. He was in the sacred pause. After the man had exhausted himself and run out of insults, he fell silent, confused by the master's lack of reaction. The master then turned to him and asked a simple question. If you prepare a gift for someone, he said, and that person does not accept it, to whom does the gift belong? The man, taken aback, thought for a moment and replied, well, it would belong to me, since I was the one who prepared it. The master nodded gently. Exactly, he said, and so it is with your anger. You have offered me the gift of your insults and your rage. I have chosen not to accept it. This story reveals the profound power hidden within the pause. The master used the space he created with his silence to make a conscious choice. He recognized the anger as a gift from the other person, a product of that person's own suffering, and he realized that he was under no obligation to accept it. His pause was his act of non-acceptance. How often in our own lives do we instantly accept the toxic gifts that others try to hand us? Someone offers us a gift of criticism, and we immediately take it and feel hurt. Someone offers us a gift of impatience, and we immediately accept it and become angry. The practice of the sacred pause allows us to see the gift being offered and to make a choice. We can politely, and often silently, refuse to take it. We realize that their anger belongs to them. It is a manifestation of their suffering. Our suffering is optional. This is not a passive stance. It is one of profound strength. It is the wisdom of non-doing, the refusal to add more energy to a destructive fire. In that space, we break the cycle of reactivity and become a source of peace in a world that is so often at war with itself. This space, this pause, gives us clarity. But what, precisely, should we be looking at within that space? How do we learn to observe the inner storm of anger without getting swept away by it? We must now learn the art of becoming a fearless weather watcher of our own heart. We have discovered the sacred pause, that precious space between the world's stimulus and our own response. We have learned to use the simple command, stop, to create a moment of stillness in the heart of a rising storm. Now, we stand in that quiet space, the storm of anger still swirling within us, and we are faced with a crucial question. What do we do here? Our lifelong conditioning screams at us to do one of three things: to fight the storm, trying to force it into submission, to flee from it, distracting ourselves and suppressing the feeling, or to analyze it, getting lost in the why, and feeding the very stories that give the storm its power. The path of mindfulness offers a fourth, revolutionary alternative: to simply watch the storm, to become the calm, unwavering witness to our own inner weather, knowing that we are not the storm, but the sky in which the storm is passing. This practice begins by making a radical shift in our attention. When anger arises, our focus is almost always on the external trigger and the story in our mind. We are obsessed with the person who wronged us and the narrative of injustice. The first step in watching the storm is to consciously withdraw our attention from the story and to place it with great gentleness on the raw, physical sensations of the anger within our own body. We move from the head to the body. We temporarily set aside the why and become deeply curious about the what. What does this anger actually feel like as a pure, physical energy? Let us explore this together, as if we are scientists discovering a new phenomenon. You can begin by bringing your awareness to your face and jaw. Without needing to change anything, simply notice: is there a clenching in the jaw muscles? Is there a tightness around the mouth? Is the space between your eyebrows furrowed with tension? Just notice, with a neutral, gentle curiosity. Now, let your awareness travel down to your neck and shoulders. This is a place where we hold so much of our stress and defensiveness. Are your shoulders hunched forward or creeping up toward your ears? Can you feel a solid, rock-like tension there? Again, just feel the raw sensation. Don't label it bad. Simply notice tightness or hardness. Allow your attention to move into your chest, the area around your heart. What do you feel here? Perhaps you can feel your heart beating faster than usual. Perhaps there is a sense of constriction, as if a band were tightening around your chest. Or maybe you feel a distinct sensation of heat, a burning fire at your core. Whatever is there, just let your awareness rest upon it, feeling the pure, physical energy of the emotion. Now, guide your attention down into your stomach and abdomen. Is there a knot of tension there? A churning, unsettled feeling? Many of us experience anger as a deep, visceral tightening in our gut. Feel it, without resistance. And finally, let your awareness fill your arms and your hands. Is there a buzzing energy there? Are your hands clenched into fists, with your thumbnails digging into your fingers? This is the body's primal readiness for a fight. Simply be aware of it. By undertaking this gentle tour of the body, we accomplish something extraordinary. We deconstruct the overwhelming and abstract concept of anger into a series of manageable, concrete, and neutral physical sensations. Heat, pressure, tightness, pulsing. It is no longer a monstrous entity named my rage. It is now just energy, just sensation, happening in the body. This alone begins to drain it of its power over us. Once we have established this anchor in the body, we can then, with greater stability, turn our attention to the mental aspect of the storm, our thoughts. Imagine your mind is a vast, open blue sky. Your awareness is the sky itself, limitless, clear, and fundamentally peaceful. Your thoughts, including your angry thoughts, are simply clouds that drift through this sky. They are not the sky. They are temporary weather patterns. The practice is to rest as the sky and watch the clouds of thought pass by. An angry thought appears. He has no respect for me. You see it. You can even silently label it. Ah, a thought about respect. And then you let it go. You do not climb aboard the thought and ride it into a long chain of further angry stories. You do not try to furiously push the cloud out of your sky, as this struggle just creates more wind and turbulence. You simply watch it arise, stay for a moment, and, if you don't feed it, eventually drift away. Another cloud may appear. I'm going to tell him exactly what I think. You see it. You label it. Planning. And you let it drift. This practice of observing our thoughts reveals the most crucial distinction in this entire journey. It is the shift from identification to observation. It is the difference between saying, "I am angry," and saying, "I am aware of a feeling of anger arising within me." The first statement, "I am angry," is a declaration of identity. We have fused our entire sense of self with a temporary emotional state. We have become the storm. The second statement, "I am aware of a feeling of anger," creates a space. There is the anger, and then there is the I who is aware of it. In that space, we are free. We are the sky, watching the cloud. We are the mountain, feeling the wind. We are no longer the victim of the weather. We are the vast, stable context in which the weather happens. Each time we make this subtle linguistic shift in our own mind, from I am to I am aware of, we are performing an act of liberation. This leads us to a beautiful parable that illuminates the entire practice. Imagine that your mind, in a state of anger, is like a glass of water into which a handful of mud has been thrown. The water is cloudy, murky, and opaque. You cannot see through it. This is the state of confusion and turmoil when we are lost in anger. Our instinctive reaction is to try and do something about the mud. We try to scoop it out, or we stir the water violently, hoping to make it dissolve, or we shake the glass in frustration. But all of these actions, all of this struggling and doing, only stir up the mud even more, making the water even cloudier. The practice of mindful observation offers a completely different approach. It is the simple, wise act of taking the glass of muddy water and placing it on a table. And then, we do nothing. We simply sit and we watch. We resist the urge to interfere, to fix, to struggle. We just allow the glass to be still. And what happens? Naturally, without any effort on our part, the laws of gravity take over. The particles of mud and sediment slowly, gently, begin to settle. They drift down to the bottom of the glass, leaving the water above increasingly clear. Our mind is this glass of water. Our anger is the mud. Our practice of non-judgmental observation is the act of placing the glass on the table and allowing it to be still. We don't have to fight our anger. We don't have to solve it. Our only task is to stop stirring it with our reactivity, our stories, and our judgments. When we can hold our anger in this spacious, still awareness, it naturally begins to settle. The heat cools, the tension softens, the stories lose their energy, the water of our mind clears, all on its own. This reveals a beautiful paradox. The more we are willing to be with our anger just as it is, without trying to change it, the more it begins to transform. The less we resist it, the faster it dissolves. This practice of watching the storm, of allowing the mud to settle, is a practice of profound trust in our own nature. But this neutral, scientific observation, as powerful as it is, can sometimes feel a little cold. Once we have learned to safely watch this suffering part of ourselves, a new question may arise from the heart. How do we now actively care for it? How do we move from being a neutral witness to being a compassionate friend to our own pain? We have learned to stand at the edge of the emotional storm, watching it with the equanimity of the sky watching a passing cloud. We have discovered that by observing our anger as a collection of impersonal sensations and thoughts, we can avoid being swept away. This is a practice of immense power and stability. It prevents the fire from spreading. But once the immediate danger has passed, and we are left in the quiet company of our own simmering discomfort, a deeper, more intimate practice becomes possible. We are invited to move from the cool, detached stance of the scientist to the warm, engaged presence of a compassionate friend. It is not enough to simply watch our suffering. The heart calls us to care for it. This is the practice of embracing our anger, not as a monster to be tamed, but as a suffering child within us, who is desperately in need of our love. Imagine that deep inside you lives a small child. This child is the keeper of all your past wounds, your vulnerabilities, and your unmet needs. It is the part of you that felt unheard in a family argument, that felt ashamed in a classroom, that felt frightened and helpless in a difficult situation long ago. For the most part, this child is quiet. But when a situation arises in your present life that echoes one of these old wounds, when you feel ignored, disrespected, or unsafe, this inner child becomes terrified. And because it is a child, it does not have sophisticated tools for communication. It does what any frightened child would do. It screams, it cries, it throws things, it lashes out. This outburst, this tantrum, is what we, as adults, experience as a wave of intense anger. The fury we feel, the sharp words, the desire to attack it, is very often the clumsy, desperate cry of this wounded child inside. What is our usual response to this inner tantrum? Too often, we treat this child exactly as an impatient, overwhelmed parent would. We try to silence it. Stop feeling that way. This is irrational. Calm down. This is the violence of suppression. Or we punish it with shame. I can't believe I'm so angry. I'm a terrible person for feeling this. This is the violence of judgment. Or we lock it away in a dark room, pretending it doesn't exist, distracting ourselves with work or entertainment. This is the violence of abandonment. In every case, we are rejecting a suffering part of ourselves. We are telling this frightened child that it is wrong, that it is unwelcome, and that it is alone in its pain. And this rejection only deepens the wound, ensuring that the child's next cry for help will be even louder and more desperate. The path of compassion offers a radically different way. It asks us to become the ideal parent to this child. It asks us to turn towards the screaming, to get down on one knee, to look this part of ourselves in the eye, and to offer it the one thing it has always needed: our unconditional, loving presence. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught a simple, beautiful method for this. It is a form of inner dialogue, a mantra of self-love. When you feel the energy of anger arising, instead of fighting it, you can silently say to it, as you would to a beloved child, "Darling anger, I know you are there." Let us feel the power in this simple phrase. I know you are there. This is the gift of acknowledgement. You are not denying the feeling. You are not arguing with it. You are validating its existence. You are saying, I see you. You are real, and you are welcome here. For a part of ourselves that has been ignored and exiled for so long, this simple recognition is like a healing rain on a parched land. The second part of the mantra is, I am here for you. This is the gift of presence, of commitment. It is a promise that you will not abandon this child in its time of need. You are turning towards it, not away from it. You are offering your stability, your solidarity. The third phrase is, I will take care of you. This is the gift of reassurance and love. It is the gentle promise of a loving parent to a frightened child. It is the deep knowing that you have the resources and the kindness to handle this energy without causing harm to yourself or to others. Breathing in, I know you are there. Breathing out, I am here for you. This simple practice, repeated with sincerity, can bring about a profound shift. The energy of conflict transforms into an energy of care. The inner war gives way to an inner embrace. This practice is the heart of what modern psychology calls self-compassion. It consists of three key elements. The first is mindfulness, which we have already explored, the ability to see our pain clearly without being consumed by it. The second is a recognition of our common humanity. When we are angry or in pain, we often feel terribly isolated, as if we are the only one who feels this way. This is a trick of the ego. The practice of compassion reminds us that suffering and anger are fundamental parts of the human experience. Everyone feels this way at times. Every human heart knows the sting of being hurt, the fire of being angry. In this, we are not alone. We are deeply connected to all of life. This realization dissolves the isolating walls of shame. The third element is self-kindness. This simply means treating ourselves with the same warmth, care, and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend who was suffering. Imagine your best friend came to you, their heart heavy with anger and pain. Would you tell them they are a bad person? Would you tell them to just get over it? Of course not. You would listen. You would offer words of comfort. You would create a space of acceptance. Self-kindness is the simple, radical act of offering this same quality of friendship to yourself. When we hold our anger in this compassionate embrace, like a mother holding a crying child, something remarkable happens. The child begins to feel safe, and when it feels safe, it begins to quiet down. Its frantic screaming softens into whimpers, and in this quiet space, we can begin to listen. We can gently ask our anger, what is it that you need? What are you so afraid of? Anger is a surface-level emotion. It is a protective strategy. Deep beneath its fiery surface, there is always a tender, unmet need. Perhaps it is the need to feel safe. Perhaps it is the need to feel respected and heard. Perhaps it is the need to feel valued, seen, or loved. The anger is the child's clumsy attempt to get this legitimate need met. A child who needs a hug might instead push another child. An inner self that needs to feel safe might instead lash out with angry words. By listening deeply to our own anger, we can identify the true need hiding behind it. And once we, as the wise adult part of ourselves, understand the real need, we can begin to find skillful, mature, and constructive ways to meet it. Ways that do not cause harm to anyone. This entire process is like inviting our anger to tea. We don't throw it out of the house. We open the door, welcome it in, and offer it a seat. The tea we offer is the warmth of our mindfulness and compassion. We sit with it, and we allow it to tell its story. We listen with an open heart, not to indulge it, but to understand it. We listen for the pain beneath the rage, for the need beneath the complaint. We are no longer its victim. We have become its loving host, its compassionate friend. This is the alchemy of the heart. It is the art of transforming the poison of our own suffering, not by eliminating it, but by metabolizing it with the powerful antidote of our own kindness. We have learned to become a safe harbor for ourselves. We have learned to tend to our inner garden with a gentle hand, but our lives are not lived in isolation. Now that we have taken care of our inner world, how do we engage with the outer world, with the very people and situations that may have triggered the storm in the first place? Having identified our true need, how do we express it with both honesty and love? This is the crucial bridge between inner peace and skillful action in the world. We have journeyed inward, learning to sit with the storm of our anger, to observe it without judgment, and to embrace it with the warmth of compassion. We have learned to listen to its cries and to identify the deep, unmet need that lies beneath its fiery surface. This inner work is the essential foundation for peace, but the practice does not end there. We are not islands. Our lives are lived in relationship with others, and it is in our interactions that the sparks of conflict so often fly. Having found a measure of peace within ourselves, we are now faced with the crucial question of how to carry that peace into our conversations. How do we speak our truth, honor our needs, and address difficult situations without creating more harm, without throwing more fuel on the fire? This is the art of skillful communication, the bridge between inner clarity and outer harmony. In the Buddhist path, this is known as right speech. It is a core element of the Noble Eightfold Path that leads to liberation. Right speech is far more than simply avoiding lies. It is a profound practice of using our words to reduce suffering and increase understanding in the world. It is speech that is, first, true, but it is also speech that is kind, speech that is helpful, and speech that is spoken at the right time. How many times have we spoken a truth, but in a way that was so harsh and blaming that it could not possibly be heard? How many times have we spoken, not to be helpful, but simply to win an argument or to vent our own pain? The practice of right speech invites us to use our words as instruments of healing rather than as weapons of war. Before we can learn this new language, it is helpful to first recognize the anatomy of our usual, unskillful speech when we are angry. The language of anger is almost always a language of violence, even if it is subtle. It is filled with blame and accusation. You did this to me. This is all your fault. It is filled with judgments and labels that flatten the other person into a caricature. You are so selfish. You're being completely irrational. It relies on gross generalizations that are never entirely true. You always forget. You never listen to me, and it is often expressed as a demand or a threat, attempting to control the other person through fear or guilt. You need to fix this now. Or, if you do that one more time, I'm leaving. When we communicate in this way, what is the result? We may feel a momentary satisfaction, a fleeting sense of power from having vented our rage, but we have also guaranteed that our own underlying need will not be met. The other person, feeling attacked, blamed, and judged, will immediately become defensive. Their walls will go up. They will be physically and emotionally incapable of hearing our pain or understanding our need. They will either attack back, escalating the conflict, or they will shut down and withdraw, creating a chasm of distance. The language of blame is a tragic and self-defeating strategy that perpetuates the very suffering we are trying to resolve. To break this cycle, we need a new model, a new language. A powerful and practical framework for this is known as nonviolent or compassionate communication. It provides 4 simple steps that allow us to express ourselves with complete honesty, but in a way that maximizes the chance of our being truly heard. The first step is observation. We begin by stating a neutral, factual observation of what happened, completely free of judgment, evaluation, or diagnosis. This is much harder than it sounds. It requires us to be like a video camera, simply reporting what we saw or heard. For example, instead of the judgmental statement, "You were so rude to me at the party," a neutral observation would be, "When we were at the party, I noticed that while I was speaking, you turned and walked away to talk to someone else." The first statement invites an argument. The second is an undeniable fact. The second step is to express the feeling that was triggered in you by that observation. This is the crucial step of taking ownership of our own emotional experience. We are not blaming the other person for making us feel something. We are simply stating our inner reality. Following the observation, we might say, "And when that happened, I felt hurt and embarrassed." This is radically different from saying, "You embarrassed me." By using an "I feel" statement, we are sharing our vulnerability instead of hurling an accusation. The third step is to connect that feeling to a universal, unmet need. This is the heart of the practice, where we connect with our shared humanity. Our feelings are messengers, pointing to needs that are either being met or not being met. So we continue. "I felt hurt and embarrassed because I have a deep need to feel included and to know that what I have to say is valued." Needs are universal. Everyone has a need to feel included, valued, respected, safe, or understood. When we voice our need, we are no longer talking about the other person's flaws. We are talking about a fundamental human requirement, which makes it much easier for them to empathize. The fourth and final step is to make a clear, positive, and doable request. A request is not a demand. It is an invitation. We are asking the other person if they would be willing to do something to help us meet our need. The request should be for a specific action, not a vague change in attitude. So, instead of demanding, "You need to be more respectful," we could make a request. "Would you be willing, the next time you need to end a conversation with me, to just say a quick word like, 'I need to go speak with someone now,' before turning away?" This gives the other person a clear, concrete action they can take. They are free to say no, but because we have expressed ourselves without blame or demand, they are far more likely to want to cooperate. This four-part practice of expressing our observations, feelings, needs, and requests is one half of right speech. The other, equally important half, is deep listening. It is the practice of listening not just to the words another person is saying, but listening for the feelings and needs hiding behind their words, especially when they are speaking from a place of anger. When your partner shouts, "This house is always a mess. You don't do anything to help," our reactive mind hears only blame and criticism. But a deep listener tries to hear the need. They might guess, "It sounds like you're feeling exhausted and overwhelmed, and that you have a real need for more support and partnership. Is that what's going on?" This act of reflecting back their potential feeling and need can be profoundly disarming. The other person, for the first time, feels heard and understood, and the entire energy of the conflict can change in an instant. There is a simple story that beautifully illustrates the importance of communicating from the level of needs, not just positions. Two brothers were fighting over the last orange in the kitchen. Both of them were shouting, "I want the orange." Their mother, frustrated, took the orange, cut it exactly in half, and gave one half to each brother, thinking she had solved the conflict fairly. The first brother took his half, went into the living room, squeezed the juice into a glass, drank it, and threw the peel in the trash. The second brother took his half, went to the counter, painstakingly grated the peel to use the zest in a cake he was baking, and threw the fleshy fruit in the trash. Because both brothers only stated their position, "I want the orange," they each only received 50%, of what they truly wanted. If they had been able to communicate their underlying need, I need the fruit for its juice, and I need the peel for its zest, it would have been immediately obvious that a solution existed where both of them could have received 100% of what they needed. This is the power of skillful communication. It moves us beyond the surface-level arguments and positions and connects us at the deep level of our shared human needs. It is the practical application of our inner work, the bridge that allows our self-compassion to flow outward as compassion for others. We have now come full circle, from the inner work of pausing and caring for ourselves to the outer work of speaking and listening with love. We have assembled a complete first aid kit for the wounds of anger. But what if we could go even deeper? What if we could change our fundamental view of reality in such a way that the triggers of life no longer inflict such deep wounds in the first place? To do this, we must now turn our attention from the tools of practice to the profound insights of wisdom. We must begin to look at the universal laws of existence that govern all of our experiences. We have now assembled a powerful set of tools for navigating the difficult moments of our lives. We have learned to pause, to breathe, to observe our inner storm with clarity, to embrace our pain with the warmth of compassion, and to communicate our needs with skill and honesty. These practices form a complete first aid kit for the heart, allowing us to attend to the wounds of anger as they arise. But a life of wisdom is not just about skillfully managing injuries. It is about cultivating a state of being that is less susceptible to injury in the first place. To do this, we must now move beyond the tools of momentary practice and begin to explore the foundational shifts in perception that can change our relationship with reality itself. We must begin to investigate the deep, universal laws of existence that, when understood, can liberate us from the very root of our anger. The first and most fundamental of these laws is the law of impermanence. So much of our anger, if we look at it closely, is born from a single, futile struggle: the war against what is. We carry in our minds a blueprint of how life should be, how people should act, and how we should feel. When the raw, unpredictable reality of life deviates from this blueprint, as it always does, we experience a feeling of friction, of resistance. Anger is the heat generated by that friction. A driver cuts us off in traffic, and we become angry because we believe people should drive considerately. A loved one makes a promise and forgets, and we become angry because we believe they should have remembered. We get sick before an important event, and we become angry because we believe this should not be happening to me now. Each of these shoulds and should nots is a declaration of war on reality. It is a refusal to accept the world as it is in that moment. This war is exhausting, and it is a war we can never, ever win, because reality will always have the final say. The wisdom of impermanence is the beautiful, liberating peace treaty that allows us to end this futile conflict. It is not a pessimistic or depressing philosophy that says nothing matters. Rather, it is a clear-eyed, courageous acceptance of the fundamental nature of existence, that everything flows, everything changes, and nothing is static. It is the wisdom of learning to flow with the great river of life, rather than constantly trying to build dams to stop it. To truly grasp this, we can contemplate impermanence on three distinct levels. The first level is that of gross, or obvious, impermanence. This is the change we can see all around us. We see the seasons turn, from the green shoots of spring to the bare branches of winter. We see our own bodies change in the mirror, aging year by year. We see relationships begin with passion and end in separation, or evolve into quiet companionship. We see mighty empires rise and fall, and technologies that once seemed miraculous become obsolete relics. On an intellectual level, we all know this. We accept that this is the way of the world. Yet, on an emotional level, we still cling. We want the summer of our youth to last forever. We want our loved ones to remain with us, unchanged. We want our moments of success and pleasure to be permanent fixtures. When this inevitable change occurs, we feel a sense of loss and grievance, a resistance that often curdles into bitterness or anger. The first step in this practice is to simply reflect, honestly and deeply, on the undeniable fact of this constant, large-scale change in our own lives and in the world around us. The second, more subtle level of impermanence is the one we can experience moment by moment. It is the truth that nothing is static, even for a single second. Let us investigate this within our own experience right now. Bring your attention to your body. Each breath you take is different from the last. The air flowing in is a new collection of molecules. With every exhalation, old cells are released. Your heart is beating, a rhythm that is constantly adjusting. Sensations of warmth, coolness, tingling, or pressure are flickering throughout your body, arising and vanishing like sparks. Now, bring your attention to your mind. Where is the thought you had just a moment ago? It has vanished. A new thought has taken its place, and it too will vanish in an instant. An emotion of contentment may be present now, but in a few moments, it may be replaced by boredom or curiosity. Your mind is not a solid thing. It is a rapid, ever-changing cascade of mental events. This direct, experiential seeing of moment-to-moment change is profoundly liberating. It undermines the very foundation of what we think of as a solid self. If everything body, feelings, thoughts is in constant flux, where is the fixed, unchanging I that can be insulted or attacked? Seeing this constant flicker reveals that what we are defending so fiercely is itself as ephemeral as a dream upon waking. The third and most profound level of impermanence is seeing that things change because they are interconnected with everything else. Nothing changes in a vacuum. A leaf turns yellow and falls from a tree because of the changing angle of the sun, the drop in temperature, the chemistry within the tree, and the genetics of its seed. Its change is the result of a vast web of causes and conditions. So it is with our anger. An angry outburst is not a single, isolated event. It arises because of a vast web of conditions, the triggering words someone spoke, but also our lack of sleep from the night before, the stressful meeting we had an hour ago, the unresolved argument from last week, our childhood experiences, and the cultural messages we have absorbed. When we see this deep interconnection, the simple, solid story of blame, "He made me angry," begins to dissolve. It is replaced by a much wiser and more compassionate understanding of a complex process. There is no single cause. There is no single villain. There is only a vast, impersonal unfolding of causes and conditions, all of which are, themselves, constantly changing. With this understanding, we can now look at the experience of anger itself through the lens of impermanence. The next time you feel its heat, instead of resisting it, try investigating it. Notice the situation that triggered it. Is that situation permanent? Or is it a fleeting moment in time that has already passed? Notice the intense physical sensations in your body. Do they stay forever? Or do they arise like a wave, reach a peak of intensity, and then, if you don't add more fuel, naturally begin to subside and change? Notice the angry thoughts, the stories of blame. Are they a permanent fixture in your mind? Or are they like clouds, drifting through the sky of your awareness, changing shape and eventually disappearing? Notice the very identity of the angry self. Does it last, or does it dissolve, making way for a tired self, or a hungry self, or eventually a peaceful self? When we see with clarity that every single component of our angry experience is fleeting, conditioned, and empty of any solid, lasting reality, we stop taking it so personally. Its power to hijack our being is dramatically reduced. It is no longer a solid monster to be fought, but a transparent, flickering ghost that we can allow to pass right through us. A crucial distinction must be made here. This wisdom of impermanence, this practice of acceptance, is not the same as passive resignation. It is not about giving up. A powerful Zen story illustrates this difference perfectly. A group of young, energetic monks were walking with their elderly master when they came upon a gigantic boulder that had fallen from a cliff, completely blocking their path. The young monks, determined and full of vigor, immediately set about trying to move it. They pushed with all their might. They tried to find levers to pry it. They worked for a long time, their robes soaked with sweat, their muscles straining, but the boulder would not budge. They grew frustrated and then angry at the boulder for its stubbornness, angry at the situation for its inconvenience. Their struggle was a war against the reality of the boulder. Soon after, the old master arrived. He looked at the boulder. He looked at his sweating, frustrated disciples. He did not join them in pushing. He simply stood for a moment, observing the situation clearly. He accepted the reality. The boulder is here, and it is too large to be moved. This acceptance was not a sigh of defeat. It was a clear-eyed assessment of what is. And because he was not wasting his energy in a futile war with the boulder, his mind was calm and his energy was preserved. From that place of calm acceptance, he then looked around and seeing a narrow, overgrown trail leading into the woods, he simply began to walk, creating a new path around the obstacle. In our lives, we often encounter boulders. They can be a difficult personality at work, a chronic health condition, a painful memory, or an unjust system we cannot change. Our anger is the act of endlessly and fruitlessly pushing against the boulder. It is exhausting, and it changes nothing. The wisdom of impermanence is the master's wisdom. It is the courage to stop pushing. It is the serenity to accept that the boulder is on the path. This acceptance is not weakness. It is the prerequisite for skillful action. Once we have truly accepted the reality of the situation, we can then ask the truly powerful question: given that this boulder is here, what is the wisest way for me to proceed? How can I change my path? This is where our true freedom and creativity lie. We stop trying to control the uncontrollable world outside, and we focus on the one thing we can always influence: our own response. This is the ultimate letting go. It is like holding a burning piece of coal in your hand. As long as you are angry and resisting, you are clenching your fist around it, screaming at the coal to cool down, all while it is searing your own flesh. The wisdom of impermanence is the simple, liberating insight that allows you to just open your hand. The pain stops not because the coal changed, but because you stopped clinging to it. We have now learned to open our hand to the impermanent nature of situations. But what about the person we believe threw the coal at us or rolled the boulder onto our path? To find peace with them requires us to look beyond the action and to see, with eyes of compassion, the ocean of suffering from which that action was born. We have learned to find peace with the ceaseless flow of life, to accept the impermanent nature of situations with the wisdom of the master who walks around the boulder, rather than wasting his strength in a futile fight. This acceptance can bring a profound calm when dealing with impersonal circumstances. But what about when the source of our pain is not an unmovable rock, but a person? What about the colleague who betrayed our trust? The family member who continually disrespects our boundaries? The partner whose words felt like a knife to the heart? Our mind's immediate and most powerful objection arises. It is one thing to accept a situation, but it is another thing entirely to accept their action. They were wrong. They caused harm. Why should I be the one to do the work of understanding them? This is a valid and deeply human resistance. Let us be perfectly clear from the outset. This practice is not about excusing harmful behavior. It is not about condoning abuse or absolving people of the consequences of their actions. It is not about saying what they did was okay. In fact, this practice has very little to do with them at all. It is for us. It is a practice for our own liberation. As long as we see the other person only as a villain, as a two-dimensional caricature of evil, we remain chained to our own anger. Our inner peace remains a hostage to our memory of their actions. To free ourselves from the corrosive poison of our own resentment, we must have the courage to look at them with new eyes, not to forgive them necessarily, but to understand them. We must learn to look for the suffering behind their actions. The foundational premise of this wisdom is simple, yet radical. People who are truly happy, peaceful, and whole do not intentionally cause harm to others. Actions that are cruel, thoughtless, or destructive are almost always born from a mind that is, itself, in a state of deep suffering. A person who feels loved and secure does not feel the need to belittle others. A person who is at peace with themselves does not feel the compulsion to create conflict. The hurtful words, the selfish actions, the angry outbursts that we experience from others are the symptoms of their own inner disease. They are the overflow of their own unhealed wounds, their own fears, their own confusion. When we see this, the entire dynamic of the situation changes. We shift from being the personal target of a malicious attack to being the unfortunate witness of someone else's tragic struggle with their own mind. Imagine someone who has accidentally ingested poison. They are thrashing about, disoriented, and in pain, and in their thrashing, they strike you. Your first reaction would be anger. But if you then realize they were poisoned, your anger would instantly soften into a different feeling: pity, concern, a desire to help. You would understand that their lashing out was not about you. It was the desperate, clumsy expression of their own agony. The practice of compassion is learning to see that everyone who acts out of anger, hatred, or greed is, in a sense, acting under the influence of a poison within their own mind. This is the development of what we might call the X-ray vision of compassion. It is the ability to look through the hard, aggressive surface of a person's actions and see the fragile, suffering skeleton beneath. It is a practice of contemplative wondering. The next time you are replaying a painful memory of someone's actions, after you have first taken the time to care for your own hurt, you can gently begin this inquiry. You can look at the image of their angry face in your mind and wonder, what might they have been afraid of in that moment? Were they afraid of losing control, of looking weak, of not getting what they wanted? You can wonder about their history. What kind of childhood did they have? What wounds might they be carrying that I know nothing about? Did they grow up in a home where they were constantly criticized, where anger was the only way to be heard? You can wonder about the hidden pressures in their life. What stresses are they under at work or at home? Are they dealing with financial anxiety or a health crisis or a deep loneliness that I cannot see? We do not need to know the answers to these questions. The power is in the sincere and gentle act of asking, The moment we begin to genuinely wonder about the other person's suffering, our mind shifts out of the narrow, self-righteous courtroom of blame and into the vast, open field of empathy. We are no longer the prosecutor building a case against a villain. We have become a curious and compassionate witness to another human being's struggle. We begin to see the frightened inner child, not only in ourselves, but in them as well. We see that their hurtful action was not a display of strength, but a sign of profound weakness and pain. The most powerful illustration of this principle is the story of the Buddha and the fearsome murderer, Angulimala. Angulimala was a terrifying figure who lived in a forest, preying on travelers. His name meant garland of fingers, because he had slain so many people that he wore a necklace made of their severed fingers as a trophy. He was the embodiment of evil, and entire villages lived in fear of him. One day, the Buddha, against the advice of all his followers, began to walk calmly and deliberately down the path toward Angulimala's forest. When Angulimala saw him, he was delighted to have another victim. He began to run after the Buddha, but a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, running with all his might, could not catch up to him. Exhausted and enraged, he shouted, "Stop, monk!" The Buddha, without breaking his stride, turned his head and replied, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." The Buddha had stopped the cycle of violence and hatred in his own heart. Angulimala was still running, trapped on the endless wheel of his own rage and killing. In that moment, Angulimala was stunned. But what happened next was the true miracle. The Buddha did not see a monster. Through the X-ray vision of his perfect compassion, he looked past the blood-stained hands and the horrifying necklace of fingers, and he saw the being underneath. He saw a man who had been terribly deceived by a cruel teacher, a man lost in a fog of delusion, a man whose heart was crushed under the weight of his own horrific actions. The Buddha saw not a villain to be condemned, but a being in a state of almost unimaginable suffering, and he spoke to Angulimala from that place of profound understanding and unconditional love. For Angulimala, this was the first time in his life he had ever been seen this way. He had been seen as a monster by everyone, including himself. The Buddha's compassionate gaze was the first mirror that reflected back to him, not his monstrosity, but his potential for goodness and his deep, underlying pain. This single act of being truly seen and understood completely shattered Angulimala's world of hatred. He threw down his weapons, renounced his violent past, and became a follower of the Buddha, eventually becoming a fully awakened, enlightened being himself. This story, in its extremity, holds a universal truth. If it is possible for the Buddha to find compassion for a mass murderer, it is surely possible for us to find a seed of compassion for the person whose thoughtless comment ruined our day. The principle is exactly the same. Learn to look past the harmful action and see the suffering from which it was born. This does not mean we have to become their friend or even condone what they did. It simply means we refuse to continue poisoning ourselves with our own hatred. By seeing their suffering, we liberate ourselves. The story of me, the righteous victim, versus them, the evil perpetrator, begins to dissolve. And as that story dissolves, so does the very foundation of our anger. We begin to see that their suffering and our suffering are not two separate things. Their painful actions cause us pain, and our angry reactions cause us more pain. We are all caught in the same web. This growing realization that the line between self and other is not as solid as we once believed is the gateway to an even deeper wisdom. It is the beginning of understanding the profound truth of our interconnectedness. We have walked a significant distance on this inner journey. We have learned to see the transient, flowing nature of all situations, understanding that even the most solid-seeming boulder of a problem is part of the impermanent stream of life. We then turned our gaze toward others, learning to look through the hard surface of their harmful actions to see the deep ocean of suffering that often lies beneath. Both of these practices have a powerful effect. They begin to soften the rigid, defensive boundary we draw around ourselves. The hard line between me and my problem, or between me and my enemy, starts to blur. We now arrive at a viewpoint that dissolves this boundary completely, a perspective that is perhaps the most profound and healing in all of Buddhist wisdom. This is the understanding of our radical interconnectedness. It is the wisdom that reveals that the entire universe is a single, interwoven whole, and that the idea of a truly separate, isolated self is the most fundamental illusion of all. To grasp this, let us begin with a sublime and ancient image from the scriptures, the vision of Indra's net. Imagine a vast, limitless net that stretches out to infinity in all directions. It is a spider's web that encompasses the entire cosmos. At every single point where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, brilliant, multifaceted jewel. Each jewel is perfectly clear and polished, reflecting all that is around it. Now, here is the magic of this celestial net. If you were to look closely into the surface of any one of these jewels, you would discover that it reflects every other single jewel in the entire net. Not only that, but each of the reflections within that first jewel also contains a reflection of all the other jewels, and so on, unto infinity. There is no end to it. This image is a metaphor for the nature of reality. Each jewel represents a single being, a single event, a single thought, a single particle of dust. You are a jewel in this net. The person who angers you is another jewel. Your anger itself is a jewel. The key insight is that no jewel exists by itself. Its entire existence is defined by its reflections of, and it's being reflected by, every other jewel. If you were to remove all the other jewels, any single jewel would cease to have any reflections. It would lose its brilliance, its qualities, its very identity. Its being is a co-being. Its existence is an interexistence. When we truly take in this vision, the foundation of anger begins to crumble. How can I be truly angry at you if you are reflected in me and I am reflected in you? How can I wish to harm you when harming you means dimming a reflection that is an inseparable part of my own being? The us versus them mentality, the very fuel of conflict, is revealed as an impossibility in Indra's net. There is only a vast, shimmering, interconnected we. End. This may sound like a beautiful but abstract piece of poetry. Let us bring it down to earth with a simple, guided contemplation taught by the great master, Thich Nhat Hanh. I invite you to imagine, right now, a simple sheet of paper in your hands. Look at it. We see a sheet of paper, but let us look more deeply with the eyes of interconnectedness. Where did this paper come from? First, we see a tree, but the tree cannot exist by itself. The tree needs sunshine to grow, so the sun must be in the paper. If you remove the sun from the paper cannot be. The tree needs clouds to bring the rain, so the clouds are in the paper. The rain itself is in the paper. The tree needs the earth, with its soil and its minerals, to nourish its roots. So the earth is fully present in this sheet of paper. The paper, it seems, is full of things that are not paper. Let us continue. A logger had to cut down the tree, so the logger is in the paper. But the logger could not exist without his parents, and their parents before them, He could not work without the food he ate for breakfast, the wheat in his bread, the farmer who grew the wheat, the sun and rain that nourished the wheat. All of this, the logger's entire ancestry and his daily sustenances, also present in this sheet of paper. Then there is the person who drove the truck to transport the logs, the workers in the paper mill who operated the machinery, the person who designed the machinery, the miners who extracted the iron ore to build the machinery. There is the electricity that powered the mill, which came from a river or a coal plant. There is the store where the paper was sold, the person who stacked it on the shelf. And finally, you are here, holding the paper. Your intention, your desire to use it, your thoughts about it, all of these have now become part of the life of this paper. Now, let us try to do the opposite. Let us try to return all these elements. Give the sunshine back to the sun. Give the rain back to the clouds. Give the tree back to the forest. Give the logger his breakfast and send him home to his family. Give the minerals back to the earth. If we return all of these non-paper elements to their sources, what is left? There is absolutely nothing left. The sheet of paper is made up entirely of non-paper elements. It has no separate, independent self. It cannot exist by itself. It is with the entire cosmos. This understanding is what Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing. To be is to be. Now, let us apply this same powerful lens to an experience of anger. Bring to mind a recent time you felt angry. Perhaps it was a conflict with a loved one or a frustrating email from a colleague. Let us hold that angry moment in our hands just as we held the sheet of paper and look deeply. We see the angry moment. But what non-anger elements are present within it? First, let's look at the other person. They spoke harsh words, but in those words, just like in the paper, are countless other elements. There is the poor night of sleep they had, which made them irritable. There is the pressure they are under from their own boss. There is the argument they had with their child that morning. There is the echo of their own father, who used to speak to them in the same harsh way. There is the caffeine from their morning coffee, making their nerves jangle. All of these things, their lack of sleep, their stress, their entire personal history, are present in those harsh words. Now let's look at our side. We felt a surge of anger upon receiving their words. But what non-anger elements are in our reaction? There is our own fatigue. There is our own insecurity about the very topic they mentioned. There is our own history of feeling disrespected, which makes us extra sensitive. There is the story we immediately told ourselves about their intentions, a story conditioned by all our past experiences. All of these things, our tiredness, our sensitivity, our personal history, are present in our feeling of anger. And we can zoom out even further. The technology that delivered the email, the economic system that creates high-pressure work environments, the cultural norms of communication, all of these wider, impersonal forces are also present in that single, personal moment of anger. When we see this with clarity, the simple, solid, blaming story, "That person made me angry," becomes impossible to believe. It's like saying the logger alone made the paper. It's a laughable oversimplification. The moment of anger was not created by one person. It was co-created, co-arisen from an unimaginably vast and complex web of interacting causes and conditions, stretching back through time. There is no single villain. There is no isolated perpetrator. There is only the vast tapestry of interbeing. And this particular moment of anger is one pattern that has temporarily emerged from the weaving of countless threads. When we see this, the personal sting of the anger, the feeling of being a singular victim of a singular aggressor begins to dissolve. How can I hold a personal grudge against you when I can see the thousands of impersonal conditions that led to your action, and the thousands of conditions that led to my reaction? The anger loses its target and its solidity. This profound insight changes everything. It changes our very sense of identity. We begin to see that we are not just a single separate jewel in Indra's net. In a very real way, we are the entire net. We are not just a wave in the ocean. We are the entire ocean, expressing itself for a short time as this particular wave. This does not destroy our sense of individuality, but it places it in a much vaster, more connected context. It dissolves the painful illusion of loneliness and separation that is the source of so much of our fear and defensiveness. This insight also transforms our sense of responsibility. If we are all interconnected, then every action, every word, every thought sends a ripple out through the entire net. An act of kindness is never a small thing. It vibrates through the whole system, reflected in every jewel. An act of anger also vibrates through the system, contributing to the overall climate of conflict and suffering. We realize that healing ourselves is one of the greatest gifts we can give to the world, because our own inner peace contributes to the peace of the whole. Harming another is, quite literally, harming ourselves. And so, we become more mindful, more careful, more compassionate, not out of a sense of religious duty, but out of a clear-eyed understanding of the way things are. We are all in this together. There is no escape. And this deep, unshakable knowledge of our shared existence completely changes how we relate to those who challenge us. They are no longer separate enemies to be defeated. They are other parts of ourselves, other jewels in the net, whose actions, however painful, are offering us a profound reflection, a precious opportunity to wake up. They are no longer a boulder on our path. We begin to see that they are the path. We have traveled to the vast and humbling vistas of our own interconnectedness, seeing that the line between self and other, between friend and enemy, is far more porous than we ever imagined. We are all jewels in Indra's net, reflecting and co-creating one another in every moment. This profound understanding prepares us for one of the most radical and transformative shifts in perspective on the entire spiritual path. It is a teaching that asks us to look directly at the people who cause us the most pains, the difficult, frustrating, and infuriating people in our lives, and to see them not as obstacles to our peace, but as its very architects. It is the wisdom of finding the teacher in the enemy and the gift in the grievance. In our search for growth, we tend to seek out teachers who are kind, wise, and gentle. We read books by enlightened masters. We listen to calming lectures. We attend workshops that make us feel safe and supported. And these are wonderful and necessary parts of the journey. But the universe, in its infinite wisdom, provides us with another kind of teacher, one that we do not have to seek out, and one that we certainly do not have to pay. These teachers appear in our lives as the critical boss, the unreliable friend, the abrasive family member, the political opponent whose views we cannot stand. These are our difficult people. Our usual reaction to these teachers is to resist their lessons, to complain about their curriculum, and to wish for a different instructor. We believe that our peace will begin only when they are gone. The wisdom path suggests the exact opposite. Our true, unshakable peace begins only when we learn to see them as the invaluable, if challenging, teachers they truly are. How do they teach us? They teach us by acting as a perfect, unflattering mirror. A kind teacher might tell us about our attachments in a gentle way. A difficult person shows us our attachments with ruthless precision. They don't have to know our weak spots. They simply act according to their own nature, and our own weak spots react automatically. The intensity of our angry or hurt reaction to another person is the most accurate diagnostic tool we have for discovering our own unhealed wounds. If another person's criticism sends you into a spiral of rage or shame, they are not giving you that feeling. They are revealing the deep, pre-existing wound of your own insecurity and your attachment to being seen as perfect. If another person's incompetence or laziness makes you furious, they are revealing your own attachment to control, your own impatience, and perhaps your own unacknowledged fear of failure. If another person's perceived selfishness infuriates you, they may be holding up a mirror to your own unexamined selfishness, or revealing a deep-seated fear that your own needs will not be met. The difficult person is like a skilled physician who presses on different parts of our body and asks, "Does it hurt here?" When we cry out in pain, we tend to blame the doctor's finger, but the wise patient understands that the finger is not the problem. The finger is simply providing invaluable information about where the underlying injury is located. The people who push our buttons are simply showing us where our buttons are. They are showing us the exact location of the attachments, the rigid beliefs, and the tender wounds that are the true source of our suffering. Without them, we could live our entire lives in a comfortable illusion, never knowing the places within us that are most in need of healing and attention. They provide the grit that irritates the oyster, creating the pressure necessary for a pearl of wisdom to form. This understanding allows us to make a fundamental shift in the very question we ask ourselves when faced with a difficult interaction. The old, disempowering question is, why is this person doing this to me? This question casts us in the role of a helpless victim and focuses our attention on something we have absolutely no control over, the inner world of another person. It is a question that leads only to feelings of resentment, powerlessness, and frustration. The new, profoundly empowering question is, what is this person's behavior teaching me about myself? This question instantly changes our role from victim to student. It takes the spotlight of our attention off the other person and shines it back where our true power lies, on our own mind, our own reactions, and our own potential for growth. Every frustrating encounter becomes a pop quiz from the universe, specifically tailored to our personal curriculum. The person cutting us off in traffic is giving us a surprise lesson in patience. The family member who brings up a painful topic is offering us a graduate-level seminar in equanimity. The colleague who takes credit for our work is providing a masterclass in letting go of our attachment to recognition. When we can genuinely ask, "What is my homework here?" the entire energy of the situation is transformed. The interaction is no longer just a meaningless, painful event. It is now a rich, meaningful opportunity for practice and liberation. A powerful story illustrates the highest form of this practice. A monk was walking by a river when he saw a scorpion that had fallen into the water and was drowning. Acting from his vow of compassion, the monk reached down to scoop the scorpion out and save it. As he lifted it, the scorpion, acting from its own nature, stung his hand. The monk, in a spasm of pain, dropped the scorpion back into the water. Seeing it was still drowning, he immediately reached down to save it again. And again, the scorpion stung him. A bystander who had been watching this unfold shouted, "You foolish man! Don't you see it will just keep stinging you? Why do you keep trying to save it?" The monk, looking at his swollen hand, calmly replied, "My friend, it is the nature of the scorpion to sting. It is my nature to save." Oh, this story reveals the ultimate lesson our difficult teachers can offer us. The monk's actions were not conditional on the scorpion's behavior. He was not trying to teach the scorpion a lesson or change its nature. He simply recognized that the scorpion was acting according to its nature, a nature born of fear and instinct. The presence of the stinging scorpion gave the monk the perfect opportunity to live out, to embody his own chosen nature of compassion. Our difficult people are our scorpions. They will act according to their nature, a nature that, as we have seen, is conditioned by their own suffering. They will sting. We cannot control this, but their stinging presents us with a golden opportunity to ask ourselves, what is my nature? In the face of this sting, will I react with my conditioned nature, the nature of anger, blame, and retaliation? Or will I choose to act from my deepest, wisest, most compassionate self? The difficult person gives us the chance not just to believe in our values, but to live them. When we can truly see this, an unlikely emotion begins to dawn in our hearts. Gratitude. We are not grateful for the pain of the sting, but we can be profoundly grateful for the lesson the sting provides. We can feel a sense of gratitude for these difficult, unpaid teachers who dedicate themselves so tirelessly to showing us exactly where we are still caught, where we are still not free. They are our most challenging, and therefore our most effective spiritual friends. They are the allies who, through their own brokenness, help us to become whole. This is the final alchemical transformation. The enemy becomes the teacher, the obstacle becomes the path, the poison becomes the medicine. We have learned to see the situation with wisdom, to see the other person with compassion, and to see the interaction as a teaching. Now, only one task remains. We must address the lingering debt of the past. We must learn how to fully release the resentment we hold for the painful lessons and the many stings we have received along the way. To do this, we must undertake one of the most courageous acts of the human heart, the practice of forgiveness. We have journeyed through the profound and expansive landscapes of the inner world. We have learned to see the impermanent nature of our troubles, the hidden suffering within those who harm us, our deep connection to all of life, and even the wisdom of finding a teacher in our greatest enemy. These shifts in perspective can dissolve the very foundations of our anger in the clear light of wisdom. Yet, even with all this understanding, we may find that a stubborn residue remains. There can be a lingering bitterness, a cold knot of resentment in the heart when we think of certain people or past events. It is the feeling of a debt that has not been paid, an injustice that has not been righted. This is the heavy burden of unforgiveness. To complete our journey of liberation from anger, we must address this final, painful weight. We must learn the courageous and deeply misunderstood art of forgiveness. Let us begin by clearing the ground, for the word forgiveness is heavy, with misconceptions that make it feel impossible. We must first understand what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not condoning. It is not saying that the harmful action was acceptable or okay. Harm is harm. Pain is pain. Forgiveness does not require us to pretend otherwise. Forgiveness is not forgetting. We do not need to develop amnesia or erase the memory of what happened. The memory will likely remain, but forgiveness is the practice that can drain the memory of its painful, toxic charge, turning it from a festering wound into a clean, painless scar. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation. This is perhaps the most important point. We can forgive someone completely, in the deepest privacy of our own heart, while also making the wise and self-protective decision to never see or speak to them again. Forgiveness is an internal act, not an external one. Finally, and most crucially, forgiveness is not a gift we give to the other person. They may never know about it. They may not deserve it. It has nothing to do with them. Forgiveness is an act of profound self-love, a gift of freedom that we give to ourselves. To understand why this is so, we must look honestly at the cost of unforgiveness. Holding onto a grudge, nursing a resentment, is not a passive state. It is an active, energy-consuming process. We must continually stoke the fires of the old memory, replaying the scenes in our mind, rehearsing the arguments, feeling the old sting of the injustice over and over again. We tell ourselves that we are doing this to punish the other person, but they are often living their life completely unaware of the turmoil in our mind. The famous saying puts it perfectly: holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. We are the ones whose hands are being seared. This inner fire of resentment poisons our own system. It manifests as chronic stress, which can lead to physical illness. It colors our entire worldview, making us cynical, bitter, and suspicious. It prevents us from being truly present and joyful in our current life, because a significant part of our energy is forever tethered to the injustices of the past. Unforgiveness is a prison we build for ourselves, brick by painful brick, and then we hand the key to the person who hurt us, waiting for them to let us out. Forgiveness is the realization that the key has been in our own pocket all along. The story of two Zen monks on a long journey illustrates this truth with beautiful simplicity. One monk was senior, and the other was his junior. They came to a wide, muddy river, where a young woman in fine clothes was standing, afraid to cross for fear of ruining her silks. The monastic vows of these monks were very strict. They were forbidden from touching a woman. The junior monk, mindful of the rules, stood back, expecting they would simply have to wait. The senior monk, however, looked at the woman, saw her genuine distress, and without a word, he walked over, lifted her into his arms, carried her across the turbulent river, and set her down gently on the other side. He then continued his journey. The junior monk, shocked and appalled, followed behind in furious silence. For hours, his mind was a storm of judgment. He replayed the scene, building a case against his master for breaking their sacred vows. His own present moment, the beautiful scenery of the path, the feeling of the sun on his skin, was completely poisoned by the burden of his righteous anger. Finally, after many miles, he could bear it no longer. He burst out, confronting his master. "How could you do that?" he demanded. "Our rules clearly forbid us to touch a woman. You have violated our vows." The senior monk stopped, looked at his agitated junior with eyes full of compassion, and said softly, "Brother, I set that woman down by the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This simple question reveals everything. The past event, the woman, was the grievance. The senior monk dealt with the situation in the present moment and then let it go completely. The junior monk, through his judgment and his refusal to let go, was still mentally and emotionally carrying the heavy burden of the past, long after it was over. His unforgiveness was a heavy weight on his own back, poisoning his own journey. Forgiveness is the simple, liberating act of putting the woman down. It is the choice to stop carrying the past into our precious present. So how do we do this? Forgiveness is not a switch we can flip, but a process we can undertake, a gentle turning of the heart. It begins with the first step, fully acknowledging our own pain. We cannot heal a wound we deny exists. Allow yourself to feel, without judgment, the full depth of the hurt that was caused. The second step is to cultivate understanding. This involves all the wisdom we have explored. We reflect on the suffering, the ignorance, and the vast web of conditions that led to the other person's harmful action. We see them not as a monster, but as a suffering being, an empty boat carried by currents they did not control. This is not for them. It is to loosen the personal, targeted nature of the offense in our own mind. The third step is to feel the cost of our own resentment. We must become intimate with the searing heat of the coal in our own hand. We acknowledge how carrying this anger has burdened our spirit, stolen our joy, and kept us trapped. We see with clarity that the person who is suffering most from our unforgiveness is us. And this leads to the fourth step, which is a conscious decision to release the debt. Imagine the other person owes you something: an apology, remorse, a change of heart. You could wait forever for this payment, a payment that may never arrive. Forgiveness is the executive decision to cancel the debt. It is a declaration of your own financial and emotional independence. You can do this in a quiet moment, speaking from your heart, even if only to yourself. You might say, "For the pain you caused me, for the wrong that was done, I see it clearly. I will no longer hold this debt against you. I will no longer wait for a payment that may never come. For the sake of my own peace, for the freedom of my own heart, I release you. And in releasing you, I release myself." And finally, as we practice offering this grace to others, we must remember to offer it to the person who needs it most: ourselves. We must forgive ourselves for our own unskillful actions, for the angry words we spoke when we were in pain. We must forgive ourselves for not being the perfect, enlightened saint we sometimes wish we were. And we must forgive ourselves for the simple human act of holding on to a grudge for so long. This final act of self-forgiveness is the ultimate unburdening. It is the act of opening our own prison door, dropping the hot coal for good, and stepping out of the shadows of the past into the fresh, open air of the present moment. This act cleanses the heart, leaving behind a space that is clear, fertile, and ready. We have now healed the wounds of the past. The journey now turns toward the future. The question becomes, what will we now choose to plant, to cultivate, in this precious, open ground of the heart? We have now arrived at a pivotal moment in our journey, a moment of profound cleansing and release. Through the wisdom of seeing impermanence, suffering, interconnectedness, and the teacher in our enemy, we have prepared the ground. And with the courageous act of forgiveness, we have pulled up the most stubborn and deeply rooted weeds of past resentment, freeing ourselves from the heavy chains of yesterday. The garden of our heart, once overgrown and hardened, is now cleared. The soil is soft, open, and ready. The crucial question that now arises is this: what shall we intentionally plant in this newly fertile ground? It is not enough to simply remove the negative. A wise gardener knows that they must actively cultivate the positive. We now turn from the practices of release to the practices of cultivation. And we begin with the virtue that is the quiet, unshakable bedrock of a peaceful heart, the direct antidote to the frantic, demanding energy of anger. We begin the practice of patience. In our modern world, patience has a reputation problem. We often associate it with weakness, with passivity, with being a doormat who lets others take advantage. Our culture celebrates speed, efficiency, disruption, and relentless forward momentum. To be patient is often seen as a lack of ambition or a failure to take control. But in the context of inner wisdom, this could not be further from the truth. Patience, known in the Buddhist tradition as kshanti, is not a passive waiting. It is a superpower. It is the expression of a profound and unshakable inner strength. It is not the flimsy reed that is blown about by every gust of wind, but the deep-rooted, ancient mountain that allows the fiercest storms to rage against its slopes, remaining utterly unmoved, its core of granite undisturbed. Patience is not the absence of difficulty. It is the inner fortitude that allows us to meet difficulty without being broken by it. It is the quiet, immense strength of non-reaction. To truly appreciate the strength of patience, we must first dissect its opposite, the frantic, suffering state of impatience. What is impatience, really? At its core, impatience is a form of anger. It is a low-grade rage directed not at a person, but at the very fabric of reality, at time itself. It is born from the arrogant and fundamentally flawed belief that the universe should operate on our personal timetable. When we are stuck in a traffic jam, our impatience is a declaration that all these other cars should get out of my way. When we are waiting for a slow computer to load, our impatience is a demand that the laws of physics and data transfer bend to my will. When we are waiting for another person to change, our impatience is a rejection of their own process and an insistence that they conform to my desired pace of development. In every case, impatience is rooted in a desire to control the uncontrollable. It is a violent rejection of the present moment in favor of a future moment that we believe will be better. This constant rejection of what is creates a state of perpetual inner conflict, a buzzing, nervous energy that robs us of our peace and exhausts our spirit. When we see impatience, not as a sign of our own importance and urgency, but as a self-inflicted form of suffering, we can begin to find the motivation to let it go. Patience is a muscle, and like any muscle, it must be trained. We do not begin by trying to be patient in the midst of a major life crisis. We start with small, everyday weights, training in the countless little gyms of patience that life provides for us each day. Consider the traffic jam. Our habitual reaction is to tense up, to grip the steering wheel, to mutter under our breath, to feel our blood pressure rise. The practice of patience invites a different response. We can use this trapped time as an opportunity for formal practice. We can feel the weight of our body in the seat. We can listen to the hum of the engine. We can watch the clouds in the sky. We can turn our car into a mobile meditation hall, practicing mindful breathing with each red light. The time is no longer wasted. It is transformed into a period of inner cultivation. Consider the long queue at the grocery store or the bank. The familiar surge of impatience arises. We pull out our phones, seeking a quick escape from the discomfort of waiting. The practice of patience invites us to instead stay present. We can feel our feet solid on the ground. We can observe the people around us, not with judgment, but with a gentle curiosity, imagining their own lives, their own hopes and fears. We turn a moment of frustration into a moment of connection and grounding. Consider the spinning wheel on a computer screen. This is a potent, modern teacher of impatience. As you feel the familiar tightening in your chest, the urge to tap your fingers, can you instead consciously use your out-breath to soften your shoulders? Can you use each spin of the wheel as a reminder to relax your jaw? In these tiny moments, repeated hundreds of times, the muscle of patience is built. We are training ourselves in low-stakes situations to meet a small frustration with a small relaxation, creating a new neural pathway, a new habit of the heart. This patient, often unseen, work is captured perfectly in the parable of the Chinese bamboo tree. A farmer decides to plant the seed of this special bamboo. He prepares the soil, plants the seed, and begins to water and fertilize it every single day. He does this for the entire first year, but nothing appears above the ground. He continues his faithful, daily work for a second year, and still, there is no sign of a sprout. The third year comes and goes. The fourth year comes and goes. His neighbors, who have planted crops that yield quick results, begin to mock him. "Why do you waste your time and your water," they say, "on an empty patch of dirt?" The farmer, having faith in the nature of the bamboo, simply continues his patient, daily labor. Then, sometime during the 5th year, a tiny green shoot finally breaks through the soil, and an astonishing thing happens. In the space of just 6 weeks, the bamboo tree explodes in a flurry of growth, shooting up to more than 80 feet in height. What was happening during those 4 long years of apparent nothingness? Was the farmer's work a waste? Underground, hidden from sight, the bamboo was engaged in a monumental task. It was building a vast, intricate, and incredibly strong root system. It was spreading its foundations far and wide, creating the necessary support structure that would allow for its future, explosive growth. Without those 4 years of patient, unseen, underground development, the rapid upward growth would have been impossible. The tall stalk would have simply toppled over at the first gust of wind. Our spiritual practice is precisely the work of growing this bamboo, the daily, often unexciting and repetitive, work of watching our breath, of pausing before we speak, of being patient in a long queue. This is the work of watering the seed. It can often feel like we are getting nowhere, like we are just watering an empty patch of dirt. Our anger still arises, our mind still wanders. We might feel that the practice isn't working, but during this time, we are secretly and silently building our root system. We are cultivating the deep inner resilience, the unshakable fortitude, the vast and spacious heart that will be our foundation. Patience is the faith we have in this unseen growth. It is the trust that if we continue to tend to the garden of our heart with diligence, the roots of peace are growing deeper every day, preparing us to stand tall and unshaken when the inevitable storms of life arrive. This perspective is crucial because the most difficult form of patience we must cultivate is often patience with ourselves. We are impatient for results. We want to be free from anger now. We want to achieve a state of permanent peace, and we become frustrated with our own perceived lack of progress. We get angry with ourselves for getting angry. This is a subtle form of violence. The practice of patience must be applied to the path itself. We must be patient with our own humanity, with our own slow, messy, beautiful process of unfolding. We must learn to treat ourselves with the same unwavering kindness that the farmer showed the bamboo seed. We show up every day. We offer the water of our mindful attention. We trust the process. We have faith that the roots are growing, even on the days when we see no evidence of it on the surface. Patience, then, is not a weak or passive waiting. It is the strong, active, and wise embrace of reality. It is the mountain's strength to allow the winds of life to blow without being disturbed. It is the farmer's wisdom to trust in the power of slow, unseen growth. It is the spacious, non-reactive quality of mind that is the absolute prerequisite for true wisdom and compassion to arise. When our mind is agitated and impatient, it is like turbulent, muddy water. We cannot see clearly. Patience is the act of allowing the water to become still so that the mud can settle and we can finally see to the bottom. We have now, through this practice, created a calm, stable, and patient space within our own hearts. We have learned to endure the stings and frustrations of life without lashing out. But this stillness is not an end in itself. It is the platform upon which an even greater alchemy can occur. What do we now actively generate within this clear and quiet space? How do we not only endure the presence of negativity, but actively transform it with the power of love? This is the bridge from the passive strength of patience to the active radiance of loving kindness. Through the practice of patience, we have cultivated a vast and stable heart. We have learned to be the mountain, unshaken by the winds of frustration and delay. We have allowed the muddy water of our mind to settle, creating a space of inner stillness and clarity. This patient equanimity is a profound achievement, a true sanctuary of peace. But our journey does not end with creating a safe harbor for ourselves. The heart, now that it is calm, yearns to do more than simply endure the negative. It yearns to actively generate the positive. It is not enough to simply stop throwing fuel on the fire of anger. The path of awakening now invites us to actively pour the cooling, healing waters of love upon its embers. This is the practice of metta, or loving kindness, the direct and powerful antidote to all forms of ill will, aversion, and anger. If anger is the wish, conscious or unconscious, for another to suffer, then loving kindness is its polar opposite. It is the sincere, heartfelt wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy and free from suffering. They are mutually exclusive states of mind. They cannot coexist in the heart in the same moment. You cannot simultaneously wish someone well and wish them harm. Therefore, the systematic cultivation of loving kindness is the most direct strategy for weakening the roots of anger and transforming the very soil of our mind into a place where hatred can no longer thrive. We must be clear, however, about what loving kindness is and is not. It is not the sentimental, romantic love that is often dependent on attraction and reciprocity. It is not a conditional affection that we offer only to those who are nice to us. And, especially in the beginning, it is not even necessarily a warm, gushy feeling. At its core, metta is a steadfast and courageous intention. It is a focused, benevolent will, a commitment of the heart to orient itself toward well-wishing and away from ill will. The warm feelings may follow, but the practice itself lies in the purity of the intention. This is not merely a spiritual platitude. It is a form of profound mental training with observable effects. Neuroscientists studying long-term meditators have found that practices like loving-kindness meditation can literally change the structure and function of the brain. It strengthens neural circuits associated with empathy, positive emotions, and emotional regulation. It has been shown to increase feelings of social connection and to decrease stress and anxiety. The practice stimulates the brain to release chemicals like oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone, which creates feelings of trust, safety, and care. When we sit down to practice loving kindness, we are not just engaging in wishful thinking. We are actively rewiring our own nervous system, shifting it from a default mode of threat detection and defensiveness to a new default mode of openness, connection, and goodwill. The traditional method for cultivating this quality is a beautiful, systematic meditation known as metta bhavana, which means the development of loving kindness. We will walk through this practice together, step by step. It unfolds in a sequence of stages, like the slowly opening petals of a flower. The first and most important stage is to offer loving kindness to ourselves. We cannot offer a drink to another from an empty cup. If our own heart is a desert of self-criticism and judgment, we have no living water of kindness to share. For many of us, this is the most difficult step of all. So we begin with great gentleness. You might place a hand over your own heart, a gesture of warmth and friendship, and then you silently repeat a few simple, powerful phrases, letting the intention behind them sink into your being. The traditional phrases are, "May I be safe," "May I be healthy," May I be happy. May I live with ease. As you repeat them, see if you can truly offer yourself this wish. A wish to be safe from inner and outer harm. A wish to be healthy in body and in mind. A wish for a genuine, deep, and lasting happiness. A wish to move through the world with a sense of peace and well-being. Don't worry if you don't feel it strongly at first. Simply hold the intention. Plant these seeds of kindness in the soil of your own heart. Once you have spent some time offering metta to yourself, the second stage is to offer it to a benefactor or a dear friend. Bring to mind a person for whom you feel easy, uncomplicated love and gratitude. It could be a mentor, a cherished family member, a close friend, or even a beloved pet. Picture them in your mind's eye, see them smiling and happy. Then direct the phrases toward them. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. Feel your heart naturally extending its warmth to this being. This stage helps the feeling of loving kindness to flow more easily and powerfully. The third stage is to extend this goodwill to a neutral person. Think of someone you see in your daily life, but for whom you have no strong feelings, positive or negative. It might be the cashier at your local market, the person who delivers your mail, or a neighbor you see, but don't know well. By offering metta to this person, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy. We begin to break down the barriers of indifference. We challenge the habit of seeing other people as mere background characters in our own story, and we begin to recognize their full humanity, their own desire to be happy, just like us. The fourth stage is the most challenging and transformative. Here, we gently bring to mind a difficult person, someone who has been a source of our anger or irritation. It is wise to start with someone only mildly difficult, not the greatest enemy of your life. Acknowledge that this will feel hard, perhaps even hypocritical. The mind will resist. But again, the practice is about the intention, not a forced feeling. As you hold their image in your mind, you repeat the same phrases. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. Why would we do this? We do it for ourselves. This act is the ultimate dropping of the hot coal. It is a declaration that we will no longer allow our own heart to be a prison of resentment. We are choosing freedom over being right. With every phrase, we are dissolving the hard knot of our own anger, replacing it with the spaciousness of goodwill. The fifth and final stage is to let the circle of loving kindness become boundless. Having offered metta to ourselves, a friend, a neutral person, and a difficult person, we now radiate it outward in all directions, to all beings in your city, to all beings in your country, to all beings on the planet, to the animals, the plants, to beings seen and unseen. We repeat the phrases for everyone, without exception. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be happy. May all beings live with ease. This practice cultivates a heart that is vast, inclusive, and without prejudice. It is the ultimate expression of our interconnectedness. The power of metta is not merely a passive, gentle warmth. It is a potent and protective force. This is illustrated in the story of the Buddha and the raging elephant, Nalagiri. The Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, conspired to assassinate him by getting a notoriously ferocious elephant, drunk on alcohol, and letting it loose on the narrow street where the Buddha was walking. As the elephant charged, trumpeting in a drunken rage, smashing everything in its path, terror seized the city. The Buddha's own followers panicked and fled, but the Buddha did not move. He did not raise a weapon. He did not run in fear. He simply stood his ground, and from his heart, He radiated a powerful, focused, and unwavering field of pure loving kindness directly at the charging beast. The effect was miraculous. As Nalagiri entered the palpable aura of the Buddha's metta, its rage began to melt away. Its charging slowed to a walk. Its eyes, once filled with fury, softened. It approached the Buddha, knelt down before him, and allowed the Buddha to gently stroke its forehead, completely pacified. The raging elephant is a symbol for the raw, primal, and destructive energy of our own anger, and the anger that is directed at us from others. We cannot defeat this energy with more anger, with more force. The story teaches us that the only power that can truly and lastingly tame such fury is the immense, unshakable strength of a heart filled with unconditional love. Loving kindness is not a weakness. It is our greatest power. It is the shield that protects us and the balm that heals the world. We have now learned to not only endure negativity with patience, but to actively generate a positive force of goodwill to counteract it. But the heart has many chambers. Wishing for others to be happy is the work of metta. What then is our heart's response when we are faced with beings who are not just potentially unhappy, but are actively and presently suffering? This requires a subtle shift in our emotional landscape. From the radiant sun of loving kindness to the tender tears of its sister virtue, compassion, we have cultivated the quiet strength of patience, learning to be the mountain that remains unmoved by the passing storms of life. We then learn to actively generate a positive force, to radiate the sun of loving kindness, wishing for all beings to be happy and well. This practice of metta is a powerful antidote to ill will. But life, in its boundless complexity, presents us with situations that require a different, though related, quality of the heart. What is our response when our awareness lands not just on the abstract potential for unhappiness, but on the stark, immediate reality of suffering? What happens when we encounter a being who is actively in pain, whose heart is broken, whose body is sick, whose mind is tormented? For this, the heart must learn to quiver. It must learn the language of compassion. Compassion, or karuna, in the ancient texts, is often described as the trembling of the heart in the face of suffering. If loving kindness is the wish for all beings to find a source of fresh water, compassion is the immediate impulse to rush to the side of one who is already dying of thirst. If loving kindness sees a healthy child sleeping and wishes them sweet dreams, compassion sees that same child awaken, crying in distress, and feels an overwhelming, tender urge to pick them up, to hold them, and to soothe their pain. It is the heart's active response to the reality of suffering. It is the sincere and powerful wish. May you be free from this pain. May your suffering come to an end. It is essential, at the outset, to distinguish true compassion from its near enemy, which is pity. Pity, though it may seem similar on the surface, is rooted in a sense of separation and superiority. When we feel pity, we look down from a safe distance upon the suffering of another. We think, "Oh, you poor thing, how terrible your situation is. I am so glad that I am not you." Pity reinforces the ego. It creates a chasm between the unfortunate them and the fortunate us. Compassion, on the other hand, is built on a foundation of equality and shared vulnerability. It arises from the recognition of our common humanity. True compassion says, "I see your suffering. I know the feeling of pain in my own heart, and my heart moves with yours in this moment. We are in this together. Pity creates distance. Compassion closes it. Pity is a feeling for another. Compassion is a feeling with another. Like loving kindness, compassion is a quality that can be intentionally cultivated. We can strengthen the muscle of our compassionate heart through a dedicated practice. We can begin by bringing to mind a being whose suffering is easy for us to connect with. Perhaps it is a sick pet, a child who has fallen and scraped their knee, or a close friend going through a difficult time. Hold their image and their pain in your heart and allow yourself to feel that natural, tender response, that sincere wish for their suffering to cease. Then, you can support this feeling with the silent repetition of compassionate phrases. May you be free from this pain. May you be healed. May you find peace in your heart. Feel the sincerity of this wish radiating from you to them. From this starting point, we can slowly expand the circle. We can bring to mind our neighbors, our colleagues, people in our community, and extend the same wish to them, acknowledging the hidden struggles and silent pains that they all carry. Then, we can expand it further to all beings in the world who are experiencing the suffering of war, of famine, of illness, of injustice, of loneliness. We hold the immense suffering of the world in our heart, not with a feeling of being overwhelmed, but with the vast, steady, and courageous wish. May all who are suffering find relief. May all beings be free from their pain. And now, we come to the most transformative step. We can gently bring to mind the difficult person, the one who has been the source of our anger. But this time, we look at them through a different lens. We use the X-ray vision we have cultivated to see that their hurtful actions were themselves a form of suffering. Their mind, on fire with anger, is a torment. Their heart, constricted with hatred, is a painful prison. Their delusion, which causes them to create harm, is a deep sickness of the spirit. Seeing this, we can, perhaps for the first time, offer a genuine sense of compassion. We are not condoning their action. We are feeling compassion for the inner suffering that produced the action. We can silently wish, may you be free from the suffering of your own anger. May you be free from the poison of hatred that is destroying you from within. May you, too, find peace. When we can touch this state of mind, our anger towards them becomes unsustainable. How can you hate someone when your deepest wish is for their suffering to end? You are no longer their enemy. You have become their secret, compassionate doctor, wishing for the cure of their spiritual disease. The journey from personal grief to universal compassion is beautifully illustrated in the ancient story of Kisa Gautami. Kisa Gautami was a young woman whose infant son had died. She was driven mad by a grief so profound that she refused to accept his death. Clutching the small, lifeless body, she wandered from house to house, begging everyone she met for a medicine that could bring her child back to life. The villagers, seeing her pitiable state, thought she had lost her mind. One person, taking pity on her, suggested she go and see the Buddha, the great physician. She ran to the Buddha, laid her son at his feet, and begged him for the medicine that would cure her child. The Buddha, with his infinite skill and compassion, did not tell her that her son was dead and that her request was impossible. He knew her heart was too shattered to hear such a truth. Instead, he looked at her with great tenderness and said, I can make the medicine you seek, but to do so, I require one special ingredient. You must bring me a single mustard seed, but it must be taken from a house where no one and no parent, no child, no spouse, no servant thus ever died. Filled with a desperate hope, Kisa Gautami began her quest. She went to the first house in the village. The Buddha needs a mustard seed for a medicine to save my son, she said. "Can you spare one?" "Of course," the woman of the house replied. As she was handing her the seeds, Kisagotami asked, "Has anyone in this house ever known death?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, dear woman," she said, "the living are few, but the dead are many. Do not remind me of my greatest sorrow. We lost our beloved father just last year." Kisagotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same everywhere. Every family was happy to give her a mustard seed, but every family had been touched by the hand of death. One had lost a spouse, another a child, another a sibling. As the sun began to set, the profound truth of her quest began to dawn on her weary mind. There was no home, no family, no person who was a stranger to loss and suffering. Her own personal, isolating grief, which she thought was the most important thing in the universe, was revealed to be a universal experience, a sorrow shared by every other human being she had met. Her heart, which had been constricted and tight around her own pain, broke open. But it broke open into a feeling of vast, boundless compassion. She saw her own sorrow reflected in every other face. She was no longer alone in her pain. She carried her son's body to the charnel ground and returned to the Buddha, not as a desperate mother seeking a miracle, but as a wise woman seeking the path to end this universal ocean of suffering for all. Kisagotami's journey is our journey. We are all clinging to our own particular suffering, believing it to be unique and personal. The practice of compassion is the act of going from house to house, of looking into the hearts of others and recognizing the same pain we feel in ourselves. This realization is the medicine. It heals the wound of separation. It teaches us that compassion is not a choice we make, but the natural, unavoidable response of a heart that is open to the truth of the world. It is the trembling of our shared humanity. Having learned to wish for others to be happy and to wish for them to be free from suffering, we must now address one final, subtle challenge of the heart. What is our response when we see others succeeding, when we witness their good fortune? This requires a special kind of generosity of spirit, a joy that is the direct antidote to the poison of envy. We have walked the path of the heart, learning to meet all beings with the wish for their happiness, which is loving kindness, and learning to meet their suffering with the trembling wish for its end, which is compassion. These two wings, metta and karuna, allow the heart to soar. But there is a third essential quality we must cultivate, one that addresses a very subtle and insidious poison of the mind, a poison that can quietly undermine both our peace and our goodwill towards others. We must now turn our gaze to our heart's response when we witness the success, the joy, and the good fortune of other people. The practice that meets this reality with grace and open-heartedness is known as mudita, or sympathetic joy. It is the noble and liberating ability to rejoice in the happiness of others. On the surface, this may sound simple. Of course, we are happy when good things happen to people we love, but if we are honest with ourselves, we know it is not always so straightforward. A dear friend gets the promotion we secretly wanted. A sibling enjoys a level of financial success that has eluded us. A colleague receives public praise for a project we also worked on. In these moments, alongside any genuine happiness we may feel for them, another, colder emotion often arises. A tightening in the chest, a sour taste in the mouth, a whispering voice in the mind that says, "Why them and not me?" This is the voice of envy, the dark shadow of mudita. Envy is one of the most painful and isolating of all human emotions. It is a self-imposed torture, a form of suffering we inflict upon ourselves in response to someone else's good fortune. To understand how to cultivate sympathetic joy, we must first dissect the anatomy of its opposite. Envy is born from a deep-seated and fundamentally flawed belief system, the scarcity mindset. The scarcity mindset operates from the assumption that happiness, success, recognition, and love are limited resources. It sees life as a single pie and believes that if someone else takes a large slice, there is necessarily less pie available for us. This belief pits us against one another in a constant, silent, and exhausting competition. Every other person's success feels like a subtle threat to our own. Their gain feels like our loss. This painful mindset is relentlessly fueled by the culture of comparison we live in, especially in the age of social media. We are constantly presented with carefully curated highlight reels of other people's lives, their perfect vacations, their beautiful families, and their career achievements. And we instinctively compare this curated fantasy to the messy, unedited, behind-the-scenes reality of our own lives. This comparison is a recipe for perpetual dissatisfaction. Envy is also intimately connected to the ego, the sense of a separate and competitive self. The ego's sense of worth is often relative. It needs to feel better than, or at least equal to, others in order to feel secure. When someone else succeeds, especially someone we consider a peer, our ego can experience it as a personal defeat. Their success seems to diminish our own stature. To protect itself from this painful feeling, the mind often cloaks envy in the noble language of justice. It builds a case in its own inner courtroom. It's not fair they got that promotion. I worked much harder. She doesn't really deserve that award. She had advantages I didn't have. This story of unfairness feels more righteous than admitting the raw, vulnerable feeling of envy, but it is simply a more elaborate way of keeping ourselves trapped in a prison of bitterness. When we can see envy clearly, not as a righteous judgment, but as a painful, self-created poison born from a false belief in scarcity, we can finally find the motivation to seek its antidote. That antidote is the conscious, deliberate cultivation of mudita. Sympathetic joy, like the other virtues of the heart, is a muscle that can be trained. We can develop our capacity to rejoice for others through a systematic practice. We can begin where it is easiest. Bring to mind a person you love deeply and unconditionally, someone whose happiness truly feels like your own. It might be your child, a cherished partner, a lifelong friend, or even a beloved pet. Now, recall a specific instance of their happiness. Perhaps it was the day they graduated, the moment they fell in love, a time they achieved a lifelong dream, or even just a simple moment of pure, uninhibited laughter. Immerse yourself in that memory. See their smiling face. Feel the joy radiating from them. And now, notice your own heart's response. Feel that genuine, warm, expansive feeling of being happy for them. This is mudita in its natural, effortless form. Linger with this feeling. Notice how it feels in your own body. It is not a constricted, tight feeling like envy. It is open, warm, and light. It is itself a form of happiness. By starting here, we remind ourselves that we already know how to feel mudita. Our task is now to expand its reach. From this easy starting point, we can learn to apply mudita in our daily lives. The practice is to become a connoisseur of the good qualities and small joys of others. When you are out in the world, make it a practice to notice the good. You might see the skill of a chef preparing a meal, the kindness of a stranger holding a door open, the beautiful voice of a singer on the radio, the evident love between an elderly couple walking hand in hand. In each instance, instead of letting the moment pass by unnoticed, you can silently acknowledge it and rejoice in it. How wonderful, you can think to yourself, that such skill exists in the world. How wonderful that such kindness is present. I rejoice in this. You are actively training your mind to seek out and appreciate the good, rather than focusing only on the irritating and the negative. Now we can approach the more challenging practice, offering sympathetic joy to a person for whom you feel rivalry or envy. Bring this person to mind gently. Acknowledge the success or good fortune they have experienced. As you do this, first allow yourself to notice, without judgment, the familiar feeling of tightness or resistance that arises in you. Just see it, acknowledge it. Ah, there is envy. Then, see if you can find even a tiny, mustard seed-sized opening for a different response. You can try to reframe the situation with wisdom. You might reflect, they must have worked very hard to achieve this. I can appreciate their effort and dedication. Or you might think, their success proves that such achievements are possible. It can be an inspiration rather than a threat. You can then try, even if it feels mechanical at first, to form the intention of joy. I wish you well in your success. May your happiness continue. Your good fortune does not take away from me. This is a profoundly transformative practice. It is a direct refusal to remain a prisoner of your own envy. With each repetition, you are chipping away at the chains of comparison and scarcity. Finally, an often overlooked but crucial aspect of mudita is learning to rejoice in our own good fortune and our own good qualities. Many of us are conditioned to downplay our successes and focus on our flaws. We can practice looking back on our own lives and acknowledging our achievements, our moments of happiness, our acts of kindness, and our strengths, not with arrogance, but with a gentle, appreciative joy. We can feel a sense of gratitude for the conditions that have allowed us to flourish in whatever ways we have. This self-appreciation is not egotistical. It is the necessary foundation that allows us to genuinely appreciate others without feeling threatened. The logic of mudita is beautifully captured in the simple image of a candle. Imagine a single candle burning brightly in a large, dark room. This candle represents one person's happiness. Now, imagine 1,000 other unlit candles are brought into the room. The flame from the first candle can be used to light all 1,000 of the other candles. In the process of sharing its flame, in the act of lighting up the other candles, has the original flame been diminished in any way? Has it lost any of its light, its heat, or its wax, number? In fact, the opposite has happened. Now, the entire room, which was once dark, is blazing with light, and the light of the first candle is reflected back at it 1,000-fold. This is the nature of happiness. It is not a limited resource. Sharing it, celebrating it, rejoicing in it, does not diminish our own. It only increases the total amount of light in the world. Envy is the delusion that we live in a world with a limited supply of wax. Mudita is the wisdom that knows we are all sharing an infinite flame. When we can truly integrate this practice into our lives, our entire world transforms. If our happiness is contingent only on our own personal successes and good fortunes, our opportunities for joy will be rare and fleeting. We will spend most of our lives in a state of striving, waiting, and dissatisfaction. But if we can learn to feel genuine joy in the happiness of others, our opportunities for joy become boundless. Every time we see a child laugh, every time we witness an act of kindness, every time a friend succeeds, every time we hear a beautiful piece of music, every time we see a person enjoying a simple pleasure, each of these moments becomes a direct source of happiness for us. The world is no longer a competitive battlefield. It becomes a vast garden filled with countless blossoms of joy that we are invited to appreciate at any time. We are no longer a lonely combatant, fighting for our share. We are a joyful celebrant in the great ongoing festival of human goodness and success. We have learned to wish all beings well, to feel for them in their sorrow, and to rejoice with them in their happiness. But life is a mixture of all of these things. How do we hold this wild, unpredictable, beautiful, and painful spectrum of experience in a heart that is steady, balanced, and at peace? For this, we need the final, crowning virtue of the heart, the quality that holds and balances all the others: equanimity. We have walked the radiant path of the heart, learning to cultivate the boundless virtues that are the true antidote to anger and strife. We began with loving kindness, the gentle sun that wishes for all beings to be happy. We learned compassion, the tender rain that wishes for all beings to be free from suffering. And we practiced sympathetic joy, the shared flame that rejoices in the good fortune of others. These three qualities, metta, karuna, and mudita, the active, engaged expressions of a truly open heart. They are beautiful, powerful, and essential. But for the heart to be not only open, but also unshakable, for it to love without being consumed, it requires a fourth and final quality. This is the virtue that holds all the others in a perfect, graceful balance. It is the deep, silent ground upon which the others can safely dance. This is the crowning jewel of the four divine abodes, upekkha, or equanimity. Equanimity is the mind's ability to remain spacious, balanced, and peaceful in the midst of the ever-shifting circumstances of life. It is the capacity to meet both the pleasant and the unpleasant, the joyful and the painful, with a steady and unwavering heart. Without equanimity, our other virtues can become unbalanced. Our loving kindness, without the wisdom of equanimity, can easily curdle into possessive attachment and grief when the object of our love changes or leaves. Our compassion, without the spaciousness of equanimity, can lead to overwhelming despair and burnout as we drown in the ocean of the world's suffering. Our sympathetic joy, without the grounding of equanimity, can become a kind of manic, giddy excitement that is still dependent on external conditions. Equanimity is the guardian of the heart. It is the deep wisdom that allows us to love the world completely without needing the world to be any different than it is. It is absolutely crucial to understand what equanimity is not. Its most dangerous counterfeit, its near enemy, is indifference. From the outside, they can look similar. Both the indifferent person and the person with equanimity may appear calm in the face of crisis, but their inner states are polar opposites. Indifference is born of fear and aversion. It is a closing down of the heart, a refusal to feel. It is a defense mechanism that says, "I don't care," because caring is too painful. It is a cold, sterile, and disconnected state. Equanimity, on the other hand, is born of the deepest love, courage, and wisdom. The heart is not closed. It is radically open. It is so open that it is willing to feel everything: the pleasure, the pain, the joy, the sorrow. But it is so vast and stable that it is not thrown off balance by any of it. The person with equanimity cares deeply, but they are free from attachment to the outcome. Imagine a highly skilled surgeon performing a life-saving operation on a loved one. Their heart is filled with compassion. They care profoundly about saving the patient. But during the intricate procedure, their hand does not tremble. Their mind is not clouded by anxiety or fear of failure. Their presence is calm, focused, steady, and precise. This is equanimity in action. It is the calm that allows compassion to be effective. Indifference is the surgeon who doesn't care if the patient lives or dies. Equanimity is the surgeon who cares so much that they have cultivated the inner stability necessary to do their absolute best, regardless of the immense pressure. The traditional training ground for equanimity is in learning to remain balanced amidst the 8 worldly winds. These are the 8 conditions, arranged in 4 pairs of opposites, that constantly blow through our lives, threatening to toss us back and forth between elation and despair. The first pair is pleasure and pain. Our entire conditioned existence is often a frantic dance of chasing pleasant sensations and running from unpleasant ones. The second pair is gain and loss. We feel elated when we acquire money, possessions, or status, and we feel dejected when we lose them. The third pair is praise and blame. The ego delights in being complimented and approved of, and it stings with pain when it is criticized or judged. The final pair is fame and disrepute. We crave the pleasure of having a good reputation and being well known, and we fear the pain of being spoken ill of or ignored. A mind without equanimity is like a weather vane, spinning uncontrollably, its direction completely dictated by these 8 winds. The practice of equanimity is the cultivation of a deep inner gravity, the development of a profound stability that allows us to feel the winds blow without being uprooted by them. This unshakable stability is not a mystical state we achieve through force of will. It is the natural and inevitable result of deeply integrating the wisdom we have already explored. Equanimity is the fruit of seeing reality clearly. When you truly and viscerally understand the truth of impermanence, you naturally stop clinging so tightly to pleasure, gain, praise, and fame, because you know they are all fleeting clouds that will inevitably pass, and you stop resisting pain, loss, blame, and disrepute with such terror, because you know that they too are temporary weather patterns that will eventually change. When you truly see the world through the lens of interconnectedness, you stop taking things so personally. The gain and loss, the praise and blame, are seen not as personal victories or defeats, but as the impersonal unfolding of a vast web of causes and conditions. The most powerful image for equanimity is that of a great, ancient mountain. The mountain sits in silent majesty, its peak in the sky and its roots deep in the earth. It receives the gentle warmth of the morning sun without becoming proud. It endures the harsh, baking heat of the midday sun without complaint. It is lashed by violent winds and torrential rains, yet it is not a victim. It simply allows the wind to blow past and the water to flow down its slopes. It is covered by heavy blankets of winter snow, yet it does not feel lonely or abandoned. It experiences all the seasons, all the weather, all the 8 worldly winds, with a vast, silent, and unwavering acceptance. It is always profoundly itself. To cultivate equanimity is to cultivate this mountain-like mind. We learn to let the changing weather of our lives happen, without making our inner peace conditional on the weather being sunny. The practice of equanimity can be as simple as a silent phrase, repeated in the heart when we find ourselves being pulled off center. When we are worried about a loved one, attached to them getting a particular outcome, we can gently remind ourselves, all beings are the owners of their own actions, the heirs of their own karma. Their happiness and their suffering arise from their own causes and conditions, not from my wishes for them. This is not an abdication of care. It is a profound act of respect for the autonomy of the other person. It frees us from the impossible and arrogant burden of trying to control another's life, allowing us to love them and support them without being attached to the results of our support. When we ourselves are in the midst of turmoil, we can simply say, "This too is the nature of things. May I meet this with balance and peace." With equanimity, the heart finds its ultimate perfection. It is the spacious container that holds the warmth of loving kindness, the tenderness of compassion, and the brightness of sympathetic joy, allowing each to be expressed purely and wisely. It is love without clinging, empathy without burnout, joy without frivolity. It is the profound peace that comes from seeing the world exactly as it is and loving it anyway. It is the final and most complete antidote to the reactive, grasping, and turbulent mind of anger. We have now walked the full path together. We began this journey in the searing, constricted fire of anger. We learned to understand its anatomy and the seeds from which it grows. We looked with courage at the ways we project our pain onto others and defend the fragile fortress of the self. We then discovered the wisdom that transforms our view of reality, the wisdom of impermanence, of interconnectedness, of seeing the teacher in our enemy, and the freedom of forgiveness. And upon this foundation of wisdom, we have cultivated the four great qualities of a liberated heart: loving, kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and now, the serene, unshakable peace of equanimity. We have traveled from the narrow, burning prison cell of our own reactivity to the vast, open, and peaceful summit of a mountain. Let us now pause at this summit and look back at the path we have traveled to gather the most precious jewels of our journey and prepare to carry them with skill and grace back into the beautiful, messy, and sacred valley of our everyday lives. We have traveled a long and profound path together. We began in the narrow, heated confines of anger, seeing it as an enemy, a destructive fire that laid waste to our peace. From there, we became patient investigators, learning the anatomy of our own outbursts, seeing how they were fueled by the stories we tell ourselves and the projections we cast upon others. We became gardeners of the heart, discovering the seeds of our suffering and learning to water the flowers of our virtue. Instead, we then ascended to the high peaks of wisdom, looking out upon the vast, interconnected, and ever-changing landscape of reality, learning to see our enemies as our teachers and to find freedom in forgiveness. Finally, we learned to cultivate the four great dwellings of the heart: the boundless warmth of loving, kindness, the tender trembling of compassion, the selfless delight of sympathetic joy, and the deep, unshakable peace of equanimity. We have journeyed from the prison of reactivity to the open sky of a free heart. Let us be clear about the ultimate purpose of this journey. The goal has never been to build a fortress so impenetrable that we never feel anger again. The winds of life will still blow. The weather of the human heart will still change. The sparks of irritation and frustration will likely still arise from time to time, for they are a natural part of this human experience. The true victory, the real transformation, lies not in the eradication of anger, but in the complete and total change of our relationship to it. It is no longer our master. We no longer need to be its frightened victim or its unwilling slave. When the energy of anger arises now, we have a choice. We have the tools. We know how to meet it with the anchor of our breath. We know how to hold it with the non-judgmental spaciousness of the sky, watching a passing cloud. We know how to embrace it with the tenderness of a mother holding her crying child. We have discovered, within ourselves, a vast and cool river of compassion, always available to soothe the heat of any fire that may arise. The peace we have been seeking is not a distant destination we must strive to reach. It is not a prize to be won or a permanent state of bliss to be achieved. It is an inner capacity that we have now awakened. It is the quiet confidence that we can handle whatever life brings us, both from within and without, with grace, wisdom, and a compassionate heart. You are the gardener who knows which seeds to water. You are the mountain that can withstand the wind. You are the sky that has room for every cloud. The tools are now yours. The understanding is now a part of you. The path forward is not a great and arduous task that looms before you. The path forward is simply your very next breath. With each conscious in-breath, you come home to yourself. With each gentle out-breath, you release the tension of the world. With every small choice to pause, to listen, to speak with kindness, you are strengthening the roots of your own peace. May you walk through your days with the strength of the mountain and the spaciousness of the sky. May you meet all beings with the warmth of a loving heart. And may you and all beings find a deep and lasting peace.